recipes to share. So many cooks in the kitchen with meals for you to prepare. We've got fruits and grains, veggies and beans, more healthy food than you've ever seen. So many cooks in the kitchen, plant-based meals to prepare. So many cooks in the kitchen with ideas we're happy to share.
Hello and welcome. My name is Dilip Barman. I'm a Food for Life instructor in Durham, North Carolina. Food for Life is a nutrition education program of the Physicians Committee. And of the Food for Life instructors, there's about 300 Food for Life instructors around the world. Take a look at fflclasses.org and see if there's a class near you. We have classes about food and how to use food to stay healthy. We have classes specifically about conditions like diabetes and cancer, how to address some of those conditions. And we have classes just to stay healthy, like Kickstart Your Health. And eating on a low budget too, for college students or those who really are needy. So there's about 30 of us who are cooks in the kitchen. So many cooks in the kitchen. We started this program last May as the pandemic descended. We do these programs every month, and I know some of you have been watching us from the beginning. Welcome back. Some of you are new. Welcome to you. So this month, our topic is so many more Thanksgiving dishes. If you watched our show last year, we had a show, So Many Thanksgiving Dishes. There's so much more to go. All of our shows are vegan, whole food, plant-based, hold the fat, limited fat. So today we have a variety of presentations. I'm going to start with my orangey rice pudding. And I'm going to start by talking about rice. So a lot of people are familiar with rice pudding, and it can be an unhealthy dish. The way I make it is quite healthy. It's very low in fat and tasty. So I came up with this idea, why do we boil rice in water? Why not boil it in something else? And if you've seen some of my past shows, you may remember that I'm a citrus fiend. I love citrus. And so I started making this rice dish in orange juice or tangerine juice. I love tangerine juice especially. Now I wanted to take a moment before I cook to talk about rice. A few years ago, rice was in the news, and it turns out because of our non-organic farming practices, especially in places like where I live in the south, further south than I am, cotton, a lot of times they would use pesticides, and the pesticides would have arsenic. And the arsenic got in the water, and foods like rice were very susceptible to arsenic. And it turns out that brown rice is more susceptible than white rice because the arsenic would lodge in the outer germ and bran layers. And so this is the recommendation, and I'm using this from the Food Revolution Network, and there's a writer for the Food Revolution Network, and we'll post the link, Lindsay Oberst. And my good friend Brenda Davis, she's one of my favorite nutritionists, she pointed me to Lindy Oberst's work and this article, which we will share, about what to do about rice. Do we give up eating rice? Do we stop eating brown rice, eating white rice? Brown rice is a much better choice. It's a whole food, and I recommend the brown rice. But what do we do about arsenic? So in Lindsay's article, she recommended cooking rice, not the traditional way. Traditionally, with brown rice, you rinse the rice, you put it in a pot, you put 1.5 times as much water or vegan broth, a little bit of salt for the boiling point elevation. You bring it to a rolling boil, and then you cover and simmer it for 45-50 minutes. But the way we're going to prepare rice, or that I have prepared rice, is the way that Lindsay Oberst of the Food Revolution Network recommends. And that is, you can parboil it. So you soak the rice for 48 hours, if you remember, if not 24 hours or overnight, or for a few hours. The more you soak it, the better, because arsenic is water soluble. And then you get rid of the water. And then the parboil method says you put water in, you bring it to a boil, get rid of the water, put fresh water in, with the typical ratio, and then you cook it the way you normally do. What I do is I soak the rice for overnight or 2 days, get rid of the water, and then I cook it like pasta. I put plenty of water in my pot, bring it to a boil, and I don't cover it. And I let it boil, and as I notice the water gets a little lower, I can put some more water in. And then after about 40 minutes or so, at that point I cover it, and I reduce the heat, and then I get my rice. The benefit of that is you get a good portion of the arsenic gone. Does it taste as good as the traditional way of making rice? I think it tastes almost as good, not quite as good. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to adapt my orangey rice pudding. I'm not going to cook the rice in orange juice because I want to get rid of that arsenic. So I've already soaked the rice and I've already cooked it. I've cooked it for about 35 minutes, and at this point there's a little bit of water. It's all water, there's no orange juice. And I don't have salt. I put a little bit of salt and I rinse it away. I'm going to go to the sink, there's just a little bit of extra water, and I'm going to dump out the water, just a little bit. So there was a little bit of water left, and you can see my pot now. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the juice of 2 oranges. So there's my beautiful orange juice. I've squeezed 2 oranges. And I'm going to put this in, like so. Again, the way I used to do this is I used to boil it in orange juice, and it adds even more flavor. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and simmer it a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and add some raisins at this point. Okay, so here's some raisins that go in. I'm going to add some cloves as well. And I'm going to add some cinnamon sticks. So there go 2 cinnamon sticks. I have vanilla. I'm not going to add that yet. Vanilla is it's volatile, so it's a good ingredient to add later. But you can optionally add some cinnamon, some ground cinnamon. So I'll do that as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mix it in a bit. And you can already smell, it smells really nice. Have nice citrus flavors, citrus fragrance. Okay, and notice there's no sweetener so far. There's no sweetener, just the raisins. Okay. Okay, I'm going to speed things up a little bit. The rice is done because I cooked it already. And if you have time, you can let the citrus cook in a bit more and then add rice, the milk after a little while, but I'm going to add the milk now. Now, what I'm going to use for milk, you can get a variety of plant-based milks. This is an oat milk, vanilla. This one is not unsweetened. I picked this up by accident. I like to get unsweetened milks, but you can get some oat milk if you want. You can get some soy milk. I like this brand. This is the brand I use. There's a few brands. Eden Soy makes one I like as well, to make my own homemade yogurt, vegan yogurt, soy yogurt. But I could use this. I could use my homemade milk. I could use cashew milk. I could use almond milk. But today I'm going to use macadamia milk. This was on sale. This is unsweetened vanilla. So I'm going to add some of this. And in the handout we have all the recipes are available for free download. We will post the link. But the handout talks about how much you want to use, but it's roughly half a container. So I'm going to go ahead and put half a container in. I love this dish. It's really tasty, and it allows me to enjoy rice again in spite of the warnings of arsenic. And here's one more thing about arsenic I wanted to mention, is the recommendation is to try to cut back your rice to once a week. Now, everything we do has its risk and reward, and you might say, Dilip, I've grown up with rice, and I can't bear to not have rice every day. Well, if you need to, keep eating rice, but the recommendation is to do it once a week. And there's so many other kinds of grains you can get, and you can get pseudo grains like quinoa. Quinoa is treated like a grain. It's actually a seed. There's amaranth. There's wild rice, which is actually a grass. There's many kinds of grains out there. Couscous. So try mixing it up. Try some additional kinds of grains. But then, as I said, try these techniques to mitigate the arsenic. And so you can see now the milk is in here and it's going to cook down. This is actually done. What I would normally do at this point is I'd add some vanilla, but I'm not going to add the vanilla because I'm actually going to keep cooking it after my segment's done. But normally I'd add some vanilla. You can also add some orange flavor to make it even more orangey. So I'm also not going to do that. Okay. So let me get rid of the bowl so I don't bang into it. So there's the rice pudding's looking pretty good. And this is what yours will look like If you let it cook for a few more minutes, it won't be, the moisture will all be cooked into the rice. But I'm going to go ahead and serve it, let it still cook. And let's plate it. So I'm going to leave the moisture behind. It smells really good. There are nice bits of cinnamon and the citrus, of course. Okay, I'm just going to give myself a little bit because I want to cook it down a little bit more. Okay, so there you go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of cocoa. And if you do use cocoa powder, be aware that chocolate and cocoa sometimes is not fair trade grown. They sometimes use children for growing cocoa and chocolate. So make sure it's organic and fair trade is what I recommend. So I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some on. And add just a little. One thing in my cooking I like to do is I like to have nuances of different flavors. And one of the things, I've been working at this, teaching classes at this Turkish center where I am right now, is I've recently become good friends with a new ingredient. It's organic pomegranate molasses. I haven't added any sweetener so far, the raisins. I want to add just a little bit of this molasses. This pomegranate molasses works really well in savory dishes too. It adds a nice kind of contrasting flavor. So I'm going to put a little bit of the molasses, and it adds very little bit of sugar, very little bit of sweetness. Okay, and then you can optionally add a little bit of slivered almond. I didn't have slivered, I had thinly sliced almond, and that's fine. So you can add a little bit just for some crunch, and you don't need this. It does add a teeny bit of fat, but not much. So let's add a little bit of the almond. And then for some decadence, I'm going to add some saffron. Saffron is one of the most expensive ingredients, but it's neat. You use such a tiny amount, and it adds just a little bit of color, and it's a nice concentrated flavor. I love saffron. I don't use it often. And one more thing you can do is you can add some citrus peel, which I'll go ahead and do. So I have some of the orange that I used for to squeeze. Now, when you do this, you can use a variety of tools. You can use a variety of graters, microplaners, things like that. But what I'm going to use, I'm just going to use a nice paring knife. And what I'll do is, my goal, and I did some earlier, is to avoid the white part, the pith. It's bitter. You want just the colored part, and you want to do this with organic fruit. So I'm going to shave this. I'm going to try to be thin to avoid the white part. Okay. It's just a nice touch. You know, it adds kind of like a marmalade feel, because marmalade does have strips of citrus. Okay, so I'll just do a few. And then what I'll do is I'll cut this into thin pieces. Okay. And then, you can even dehydrate this. It's kind of fun to have slightly crispy citrus peel. So I'm going to take my pudding, and I'm going to also add some of these strips as garnish. And I'll go ahead and take the cinnamon stick. Orangey rice pudding. Easy peasy, something you can do at home for Thanksgiving. It's a wonderful dessert, guilt-free dessert, almost no sweetener added. There's a little bit of this pomegranate syrup, and it contributes very low. It's low glycemic, so it's a great choice. So with that, I'm really excited because our next cook in the kitchen is Angelita Hughes in South Carolina. I'm in North Carolina. She's in South Carolina. And Angelita always makes wonderful dishes. She's going to be making her own rice pudding. Hers is a Mexican rice pudding, and I can't wait to see how it's different than mine. You guys now have at least 2 rice puddings to try. Take it away, Angelita.
Hey everyone, my name is Angelita Alvarez Hughes, and I am in Greenville, South Carolina. I am also a Food for Life instructor, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Today I will be making a Mexican rice pudding, which is not very different from the one Dilip just made. So the recipe is in the notes, and it's you can download it. Everything is free. Again, I want to thank everyone for taking time to being with us today. So the recipe calls for 2 cups of rice, white rice or brown rice, whichever one you prefer. I believe there's like a purple rice. There's so many different rices out there. Now what I do is I wash my rice to get rid of all the starch that's in there and any little debris. dirt, grains of sand, all that. So I wash it in cold water until the water runs clear. So that usually takes about 5 times. I put the rice in there, and then I put the water in there, and then with my hands I move it around, and you'll see how the water comes out cloudy. Now don't throw away that water, because that water is actually really good for your plants. So that's what I use to water my plants with. So anyway, so I washed my rice, and then I put it in a large bowl, and I let it sit for 30 minutes. And because that water is clean, I use that when I'm making the rice pudding. So what happens is the rice kind of soaks up some of that water. And then we're going to transfer that to a large pot. Yes, you're going to need a large pot for this, because this is about halfway full. And so we transfer it into a large stock pot, and we add the additional amount of water that is in the recipe. And what I do when I've got my water in here, what I started doing, and I did not put this in the recipe, is when you put your pot on, of course you're going to start with cold water, and you're just going to sit the cinnamon and the cloves in there. Now you can put them in there just like that, if you don't mind digging for them, or you can put them in one of these little strainers. I found this at a local Asian market. This helps out a lot, because all my aromatics are in here, and so when I'm done I just pull this out and I'm ready to go. So you put your rice in here with the additional water, and you're going to let it cook probably 10-15 minutes. You want to make sure to pull out a few of the little rice grains, run it between your fingers to make sure that they're soft. Now if you have any additional water left in the pot that did not soak up during the cooking, you can drain that out. I would drain it out, because when you go to add your plant milk, it's going to be extremely watery. So I pour it out, then I add my plant milk to it, and I just let it continue cooking. And I add my raisins to it, or whatever dried fruit you want to add to it, and then I add my sweetener to it. So with the sweeteners, there's so many different sweeteners out there. Now it is 1 cup of raw sugar that I'm using in here, but I mean the pot's up to here. A serving is like 4 ounces. So to me it's a little treat. I don't eat it every day. I probably eat it twice a year. So we've got different options for sweeteners. I've got organic blue agave syrup. I also have raw sugar. I've got this wonderful vanilla bean infused maple syrup. That one tastes really good. I would start off with half the amount if you're going to use a liquid sweetener, and then taste it, and then add more sweetener to it as you taste it, because if you add the whole cup of the liquid sweetener and it makes it too sweet, you can't take it out. But if you start with half the amount, you can always add a little bit more. I also found these. I found a sweet potato nectar. Oops, I don't know if you can see that. Sorry about that. So I found the sweet potato nectar, and I found a cane sugar syrup as well. Now, I haven't tried these in this application, but I have tried them in other applications. They are very sweet, and again, you want to use half the amount of the liquid. So you're going to let this cook for a while, maybe 15-20 minutes, and then we're going to get ready to serve. Going back to the aromatics, these are cloves. So I suggest using the whole clove and not ground cloves, but that's just my preference. You're only going to need 3 because the flavor of this is really, really strong. When it comes to the cinnamon, there's, in the stores I find with the cinnamon sticks, there's one like this that's very hard. And then we've got the Mexican cinnamon or canela, and this one breaks very easily. This is the one that I prefer. This one gives it that authentic flavor that reminds me of home and how my mom used to make it. So once this is served, Excuse me, I thought I did. You can serve it just like this and have it for breakfast, have it as a dessert. Or you can put it in a baking sheet. Make sure that you lightly butter the baking sheet so it won't stick. And then you pour your rice pudding on top of that and bake it in the oven at 350 for 15-20 minutes until it's well congealed or well cooked, however it is that you like it. You can top it with some pecans and some walnuts, but this is the way I like it, and it's so good. Oh my goodness. So here it is. And I used a combination of raisins and cranberries. And then you just sprinkle a little bit of extra cinnamon on top. Just a tiny bit, or a lot, depending on how you like it. And there we go. You can also, if you're going to eat it cold, a lot of people enjoy it cold. I know my dad does. He never liked it hot. He wanted it cold. So I've eaten it cold as well. It's really good. And sometimes I'll put a little bit of plant-based whipped cream on top, but just a little dollop, not much. So anyway, that is my recipe. I hope you guys enjoy it. And up next, we've got Jana, who is in Abu Dhabi, and she's going to be making an amazing pumpkin pudding, which I can't wait to see that recipe because I love pumpkin anything. So take it away, Jana. Thank you so much, and happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, and I wish you all health and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelita, for the nice introduction. What a nice recipe you made. Delicious Mexican rice pudding. Well, welcome to my kitchen in Abu Dhabi, everybody. It's so nice to be back. 1 month goes by really quickly, and today our theme is Thanksgiving. What better theme to enjoy? My recipe is a pudding as well. It doesn't require much cooking except for the pecans. And I used a canned pumpkin puree this time. It's got nothing but pumpkins. And so here we go. Please remember the recipes are online in our recipe booklet. So here we go. You mix basically all the ingredients ahead of time. The pumpkin puree, the plant-based milk. I used vanilla flavored almond this time because I couldn't find vanilla extract to add to my pudding, but you can do without vanilla or however you wish. Some maple syrup, your chia seeds, a tablespoon of almond butter, or I found cashew butter. It had less ingredients. Basically, it's 100% cashew, so I prefer that one to the other one that had a lot of other things added. And that's it. You put, of course, your pumpkin spice, which I have very little left. I couldn't find it, so I added some cinnamon and ginger and so on. So you add everything, you mix it well together, and you put it in the fridge, and your pudding makes itself overnight. You can put your pudding, as I have done, in a larger container and dish it out the next day, or you can use ready-to-use jars. If you had dished it out the night before in these, they would be ready for you the next day to use. Reduce, reuse, recycle. I have these lovely jam jars, which I often use for my overnight oats or also for this recipe, and it looks pretty. So the next day you just open it up, mix it a bit, and then do your toppings. Now over here on the stovetop, I have my pecans. They are gonna toast for a few minutes, and that's the tricky one. You put your pecans on the pan, and you toast them for about 2-3 minutes. I've been toasting them before getting online, so they are already warmed up. And a few minutes into you cooking them, they start smelling of pecans. Your whole kitchen starts smelling them. That's sort of your sign that they're done. So at that moment is when you add your maple syrup, and you just toast them a little bit more. Mine are beginning to smell nice. In the meantime, I'll also tell you that today I made some Aquafaba whipped cream, and I also have some coconut yogurt. So we're going to try both toppings, and again, to your liking. Coconut, of course, gives you a lot more flavor perhaps, but a lot of fat as well, because coconut milk has quite a lot of fat, and that's the only kind I could find in my supermarket here was this coconut yogurt with vanilla flavor. And I happen to have Aquafaba because I had just cooked chickpeas, so I whipped it up, and this is your less fatty alternative, and it's still as good. So here are my pecans. I put some maple syrup, and this is a non-stick pan, so make sure you use a non-stick pan. And you can, if you are here, you can smell and hear the sizzling. And it's at this moment that you put your pumpkin spice mix and give it another stir. Oh my gosh, if you could only smell it. We need to work on this technology to get you all the smell. And your pecans are done. They look lovely, shiny, amazing. Here we go. But I'm going to leave this aside. I just wanted to show you how it's done. It's so easy. At this stage, you take them out and put them on a plate to cool them off, as I have done previously. You can see them here. They're crunchy and chewy and yummy. So, this lovely pudding is ready to be dished. I'm going to use these cute little things. I'm going to dish it out onto my cute little, and I'm going to make two because I want to taste test the yogurt versus the Aquafaba. So here it is. Oh, my husband's going to be jealous. One of them has more, one of them has less. So here we go. You have your lovely pudding. You had made it overnight, so on the day of Thanksgiving, your hands are free making your dessert. Coconut milk. Ooh, that's a big dough. Aquafaba whipped cream. I guess you could be more generous with that since it's less. And then you put your, be careful, they're sticky, caramelized pecans. Now this recipe is, of course, as always, very nutritious. Without the adding of the yogurt and the rather fatty pecans, it's very healthy with the pumpkin puree and my hands are so sticky now. Here we go. The pumpkin is full of vitamins and minerals as well. The chia seeds and the vegetable milk, which is not so bad. I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here. It's also both the pumpkin puree and the chia seeds are full of fiber. So if anybody is in need of increasing their fiber, chia seeds are an excellent way to get your fiber. Chia seeds are also an excellent way to get your complete proteins. Of course, you don't eat too much of it, but you can add it to your overnight oats or other things. Now, I'm going to try. This is the one with the coconut yogurt and That's yummy. It's got some saltiness to it too, which this is not going to have, but This is yummy because the aquafaba is so light. It just fluffs in your mouth with this amazing flavor. Okay, I'm gonna stop eating. This is all from me, folks. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Make it a Plantsgiving. Let's all be happy this year. COVID is letting a bit, and we're all looking forward to better times. I'm grateful for my So Many Cooks in the Kitchen team and doing these shows and reaching out to the world. Now we're going to go nearly 8,000 miles. Actually, I looked it up. It's 7,744 miles all the way to Montgomery, Alabama, to my dear friend Carolyn, who's going to share with us another yummy recipe. Take it away, Carolyn.
Thanks, John. That pumpkin pudding looks so good. I can't wait to try it. I do love a good pudding. So, welcome to Montgomery, Alabama. And today, it's all about Thanksgiving because it is November. And when I told my darling daughter, Molly, that we were making Thanksgiving food, she said, you have to make those leftover Thanksgiving sandwiches. So, okay, for my daughter, Molly, Thanksgiving sandwiches. It's a pretty easy concept. You're taking leftovers from Thanksgiving and making a sandwich. But the thing that makes them really, really special is this delicious cranberry Dijon sauce that you're going to put on the sandwich, a cranberry Dijon mustard. So you're taking leftover cranberry sauce, which I have, a container of leftover cranberry sauce right here. And it's homemade. You could also use a can of cranberry sauce. That's fine too. And the ratio is about 3 tablespoons of cranberry sauce to 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. And I'm just using the 365 Whole Foods brand organic Dijon mustard. So what I have here is about 6 tablespoons of leftover cranberry sauce and 2 tablespoons of the Dijon mustard. But remember, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, so 3 tablespoons of the cranberry sauce, 1 tablespoon Dijon. And get that all mixed up. It is delicious. Okay, so I've made this nice cranberry Dijon spread for our sandwiches. And the recipe really makes 2 sandwiches. You have a little bit, probably a little extra of this Dijon cranberry sauce for dipping your sandwich in or spreading a little more on your sandwich if you want to. Okay, so I'm just spread this on the bread, on each of 4 slices of bread. I'm using a locally baked whole grain toasted flax bread. You can use any kind of bread you like. So a whole grain bread, sourdough, that would be really good too. If you are gluten-free, then any kind of gluten-free bread should probably work just as well. And we're spreading that right on here. Okay, just gonna make 1 sandwich for now. So I've got that spread on 2 slices of bread. And then you're gonna take any kind of main dish, sort of seitan roast, or maybe a tofurkey roast, or if you have a Gardein roast, or one of those field roast main dish roasts that you use as a centerpiece for Thanksgiving. What I did was make last year on our Thanksgiving show, I made a tofu turkey breast. And so I've made that again this year. So you can go back and watch last year's Thanksgiving. And this is just sliced up of that tofu turkey breast I made last year. So I sliced that up. And this isn't from last year. I just made it the other day. But so we're putting a layer of this sliced tofu turkey. And then a layer of, you could use mashed potatoes or sweet potatoes, whatever you have left over. Sweet potatoes would be really good. I have some leftover mashed potatoes right now, so I'm just going to spread that on. Whoops. It's a messy sandwich. So about a half a cup, and you remember we're making 2 sandwiches. So that's about a 1/4 cup on each sandwich. Maybe not quite that much. Okay, and then some stuffing, leftover stuffing. We'll just put a little bit on here. I can scoop that out. So I have about a half a cup of stuffing. I'm going to add that to the middle. Just mash it into the mashed potatoes. Okay, and then some leftover greens, which, you know, usually at my house, what are leftover greens? we eat our greens all the time, but maybe make extra just so you can make this sandwich because it's really good. So we're taking some collared kale, Swiss chard, spinach, any kind of green that you have left over from your Thanksgiving dinner, and add that. Yum. Okay, and then if you want to up the nutritional value just a little bit more, you could take some broccoli sprouts, microgreens, add those to the top too. And then, so we have our mashed potatoes, our seitan roast, our stuffing, our greens, and then I'm going to add that other piece of the bread that has that wonderful cranberry Dijon mustard spread on it, and add that to the top and just cut it in half, and you have a fabulous leftover Thanksgiving sandwich. I've seen a lot of leftover Thanksgiving sandwiches lately online, and of course it's going to call for, you know, regular turkey and giblet gravy and all that stuff. So this is the vegan version of a leftover Thanksgiving sandwich. It is really, really good, and possibly even better than the Thanksgiving dinner itself. It's just really good. Okay, so, and since that's just so fast and easy, I was going to show you a really quick dessert recipe that is totally in season right now. Let me move a couple things out of the way. Okay, so I have my blender, and I have persimmons. So persimmons are in season right now. It's November, and in the South, persimmons are totally in season, and we love persimmon season at our house. We eat a lot of them. I actually have a whole case of them right here in the kitchen, so we use a lot of persimmons. So this has 3 persimmons that I've already cut up, and I went ahead and peeled them. You don't actually have to peel persimmons when you eat them, but for this recipe we're making pudding, so it's a raw persimmon, kind of raw persimmon pudding. So it's raw persimmons. There are a couple different kinds of persimmons out there. So, well, there's several kinds of persimmons out there, but what I'm using is fuyu persimmons that look like, kind of like little pumpkins or maybe orange tomatoes, but they're much firmer than a tomato. So fuyu are the kind that you can eat when they're hard still. You could bite into it like an apple if you want to, and it's not going to be astringent. The other kind that are more oblong, so these are sort of short and squat little fruits. The ones that are more oblong in shape, hachia is one of the names of them. There's several different kinds. They're mostly from Japan, but the ones that are more oblong tend to be more astringent or puckering when you put it in your mouth. If you've ever bitten into one that wasn't quite ripe, you will never forget. So it's kind of like lemon flavored chalk. It's really difficult to get through, but fuyus don't do that. So fuyus you can eat when they're nice and hard and not yet ripe. So in this case, we're using fuyus. If you use the hachia, then make sure it's really, really soft before you use it. They are delicious when they're super, super soft, kind of like a way overripe tomato. Then it will be really sweet like maple syrup. It will be delicious, but fuyus don't do that. Okay, so this is fuyus, 3 fuyus that I've peeled. I have 2 medjool dates that I've already taken the pit out of, and a half a cup of cashews that were basically raw cashews, but I boiled them just to plump them up. You could also soak them overnight, and you don't have to boil them. You could soak them overnight just to get them nice and plump. A half a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, a splash of lemon juice, and a few tablespoons of any kind of plant-based milk. And in this case, I'm using unsweetened almond milk. So we'll add that. And then we'll whirl it all up. You might need to stop and scrape down your blender a few times. You could also make this in a food processor. You don't necessarily have to have a high-speed blender. Okay, that's probably ready. That actually looks ready. I don't even think I need to whirl it up again. So we'll take a spoon, give it a taste. That is delicious. Okay, so persimmons have a large amount of pectin in them. And so this will thicken up as it sits in your refrigerator. You can eat it right away, which I would suggest because it is really, really good. But you could also put it in the refrigerator in little pudding cups, maybe sprinkle it with some toasted pecans. That would be fabulous. Maybe some pomegranate seeds on top would make it really festive. So it is a delicious, fast and easy dessert for your Thanksgiving menu. So I hope you'll give it a try. And now I'm going to send you over to Cody Stubbe in Omaha, Nebraska. She's making something I'm really excited about. It's an apple pecan kale salad, which I love apples, pecans, and kale. So yes, please. That sounds really, really good. So take it away, Cody.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Omaha, Nebraska. I am Cody Stubbe. I'm a registered nurse and I'm a food for life instructor. And today I'm going to share one of my favorite holiday salads with you guys. This is a kale apple pecan salad, and this is just really fun to whip up, and everybody seems to really enjoy it, no matter if it's kids or adults. They absolutely love the salad, and like I said, it's easy, it's nutritious, and it's really an affordable salad to make as well. So we're going to start off with a bunch of washed kale, and I've ripped it up into bite-sized pieces. You can also chop it up once, which works really nicely. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put in about 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice into this. And I've recently just washed my hands so they're nice and clean, but what I'm going to do is massage this kale for a few seconds here. You can do it for a couple minutes if you want, but what that's going to do is it's going to soften up this kale, and that vitamin C from the citrus juice is going to help with the iron absorption from all this wonderful kale. Kale, of course, is a cruciferous vegetable, and so it's packed full of nutrients. It's a superfood, so it's pretty awesome, pretty powerful, right? And it smells so good. And once you start kind of massaging that kale, you'll see it actually kind of gets a little bit brighter green. It looks really beautiful, so I'll show you that. All right, it smells so good. There's nothing like lemon juice. All right, so I got that. I got lemon juice all over my hands now, but that's okay. All right, so next, I'm just gonna throw in about 2 apples that have been washed and chopped up into bite-sized pieces. And this is a Honey Crisp, and I love leaving the apple peeling on. So if you can get organic, it's great. If not, just make, of course, with every produce, you wanna wash the outside of it. So I'm gonna dump that in here. All right, next, I'm gonna throw in some onion, and this is about 1/2 cup of thinly sliced and kind of chopped up a little bit red onion. And you can take it out if you don't like onion, but let me tell you, it makes this salad delicious. Look at the colors going in there. It's beautiful, right? Okay, so then I'm also gonna add in about 1/2 cup of red cabbage. So of course, red cabbage is another cruciferous vegetable. And it's powerful. It's a cancer-fighting food.
I am a nursing instructor currently on the cancer unit at a hospital. And so anything that I can do to help reduce risk of cancer, I'm all for it. So we have about 1 cup of halved pecan halves. So you just take that and chop it up. There's one that looks a little dark. I'm just going to get rid of that one. Okay. Whoop. Last here, I'm going to throw in just about like a nice handful of washed spinach. I like a variety in my salads, and so this just adds another little difference to it instead of kale. So you don't have to have it, but it works great. So this is a pretty big bowl, as you can see. So I'm going to try and just kind of mix this up very carefully here so I don't get it all over. But if I do, that's okay. All right. This looks great. All right. Last, I'm going to show you here. First, you can see all these beautiful colors together. Doesn't it look gorgeous? All right. So last, I'm going to show you how to make a really simple dressing that I love in the salad. So this is from, I believe it's Jane Esselstyn. It's her 3-2-1 salad. So basically, it's just like whatever type of vinegar, vinaigrette that you'd like to use in this. Normally I use a glass jar for this and pour everything in, put the lid on and shake it up. I could not find a matching jar lid today. So today I'm improvising, right? So I'm just going to use a nice Tupperware container. And so it's like 3 parts your vinaigrette or vinegar, whatever you choose. I chose a white rice vinegar for this. And then it's 3 parts your vinegar, 2 parts of like Dijon mustard, and then 1 part of maple syrup. So I did 1/4 a cup maple syrup, 1/2 a cup Dijon mustard, and 3/4 a cup of my vinegar. So I'm going to dump it all in here. All right. Luckily that just slides right out. Then I got my maple syrup. All right. I like very simple recipes that are tasty and healthy for you. So, all right, so you can see it's all in there. So now you definitely want to make sure you get a really nice tight fitting lid. I always keep my fingers on it, my thumbs on it too, and you shake it up. And this can sometimes be a good chore for one of your kids, as long as they're trustworthy that they're not going to take the lid off. That's looking good. All right. So, oh, it smells great. Okay, so I'm just gonna pour some of this on here. And it's quite a bit of dressing, so I'm not gonna put all of it on there. Some people don't like a lot of dressing, but I'm just gonna put it on and mix it up. And then what I do is I just leave the dressing with a nice spoon in it, and then people can add more to it. But I just like to give it just a little bit of a coated. You can really smell those onions in here and those apples, and just something really great about like apple and onion combination and the mustard. It's just delicious. It just really gets those taste buds all excited. So this is it, you guys. Oh my goodness. My family's gonna absolutely enjoy having this for supper tonight. And I hope that you guys give it a try for your holiday. And let me know what you think of it. Now, see, I got lettuce or not lettuce, but kale and spinach everywhere. So it's a beautiful, beautiful salad. It's got lots of color, lots of different nutrients, a lot of variety in it, and it's packed full of flavor. So please give this a try. Let me know what you think, and hopefully your family will love it as much as mine does. And you're welcome to find me at holisticdish.com, and I will have some Food for Life classes probably posted at the beginning of the year. So please check that out, and I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'm going to pass it on over to Mark. Thank you.
Cody, that looks wonderful. Hi everybody, Mark Cirk-Fennick at Let's Eat Great Food. You can find me at letseatgreat.com or on Facebook at Let's Eat Great Food. You just got welcomed by a pie pumpkin. Yep, there's a difference between those big jack-o'-lanterns that you decorated Halloween, and then the ones you really want to use for pie, they're a little smaller, so really kind of bred for making pie. So we're going to put our little friend here that welcomed everybody. I've got some other squashes here today, but we're going to make a Kabocha Squash Dip, and Kabocha is a Japanese squash. You probably recognize these guys. These are butternut squash, where if you can't find that Kabocha squash, go ahead and use a nice butternut squash, or you can use an acorn squash, which are these guys. You're probably familiar with those pretty well. Now these little guys here, let me make sure I get the name right. They are honey nut squashes. There's really, really sweet and really very nice as well. Those are the honey nut squashes. And the last thing here, this is a really interesting squash. Got this in Pennsylvania, actually Bucks County, Pennsylvania. These are cultivars that are known for being grown in Bucks County, actually in Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania. This is called a wheel of cheese. The farm that we bought this from when we were out there visiting family, they said that a really great way to use this pumpkin, this wheel of cheese, again it's called wheel of cheese, kind of a funny name, is to hollow this thing out, put your chili in this, bake this for about 45 minutes at 350 degrees, and then scoop some of the squash out at the same time you're dishing up some of your wonderful chili. So wheel of cheese, so take a look for wheel of cheese where you live, especially if you're in eastern Pennsylvania. So our Kabocha squash, really easy. I've already prepped our squash. All we've done is bake this at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. Kind of took the top off of it, let it bake for that 45 minutes, and then went ahead and scooped it all out. I've saved my shell here. I'm going to serve it up in that. So what we're going to add to this, really, it's a real simple recipe, and it's a nice little riff, a little bit different for the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, than your hummus dip or what have you. So I'm going to put some Great Northern beans in here, cannelli beans, whatever white bean. I would say that you want to use a white bean. We're going to slice up some mushrooms, and I'm just throwing some white mushrooms in this. The recipe calls for six mushrooms, just all kind of sliced up here. So we'll go ahead and just chop these guys up. Now if you want to add a little bit different texture to it, you could use some cremini mushrooms or portobellos. I wouldn't use oysters because it'd really be kind of a waste of money because they're going to get lost in the mix, so to speak. But you'll want to use a nice mushroom like these wonderful white mushrooms. These are just kind of your standard white mushrooms. Just going to get those all in there. And then the next thing that's going to go in our food processor are some red onions. So I'm going to take a nice sized red onion. The recipe calls for like one onion. If you want to put more, you want to put less. It really kind of depends. Red onions are pretty mild, so you'll go ahead and just throw those in there. And I'm going to take my other half of my onion as well. Not to be really fancy because our food processor is gonna mix this up really nicely for us. And hopefully those of you watching do have a kitchen scraps compost bucket, so we'll put those ends in that, or you could actually put it in a vegetable stock as well. So those are going to go in there, and then the recipe calls for some powdered garlic. I'm putting a couple of whole garlics in there and just going to chop those up. I like garlic. I like lots of garlic, so if you like more garlic, you put more garlic. If you want less garlic, you put less garlic. Recipes are a guide. Adjust them for your taste and whatever taste you like. I'm going to show you again really how quickly to go ahead and peel a garlic. All you do is cut that little root end off, whack it with your knife. Watch your fingers. Keep your fingers kind of tucked under. You don't want any body parts in your squash dip here. Again, it's Kabocha Squash. That's spelled K-O-B-O-C-H-A. And put that all in there. And then we're just going to give this a little bit of whiz here in my very ancient Cuisinart from the early mid-70s. we have to get in there a little bit and kind of push all our ingredients down, down, down into it. This is probably a really fun recipe too to make with your kids. Real easy, just kind of chop everything up and put it in there. I've reserved some of my bean liquid from my can after I drained those beans. So I'm going to pour maybe about a quarter cup in there, kind of get that moving a little bit. And give it a little help too. Just gotta give it a little bit more help here. It's kind of a thick dip here. Alright, just kind of move that down. Come on, buddy. Alright. A little bit more bean water. Gonna help it along just a little bit more here. The aromas are just wonderful, and you'll also notice that I put no salt in this. You can add some salt, but I think it's such a nice rich flavor that you really won't need any salt at all. There we go. A little coaxing. Little coaxing. Now we're just gonna take some out and put it right in our wonderful hollowed out bowl here. I've left it chunky. I like to leave it a little chunky. You can kind of see some of the beans in there. You can see some of the little bits of onions. There we have it. There's our Kabocha bean dip. Kabocha, I shouldn't say bean dip, it's Kabocha Squash Dip. And what can you serve this with? Well, you could serve it with some toast points or vegetables or pita points. Or you could even use this as a sandwich spread. So let me give this a little bit of a taste. It's sweet, got a little bit of garlickiness in there, just a hint of onion, and of course the bean for texture. So there you have it, folks. Mark at Let's Eat Great. You can email me at mark@letseatgreat or find me on the web at letseatgreat.com or on Facebook at Let's Eat Great Food. Okay, next is Nancy Manifold. Nancy, sounds like you've got a great recipe to share with us. Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Your squash bean dip looks absolutely delicious. I'm Nancy Manifold, and I am going to show you how I make my millet and vegetable loaf. Now, it's a very easy recipe to make with very simple ingredients, but I do realize that millet is not an ingredient that we commonly use here in the UK or in North America. And I would like to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but what I'm going to do is start cooking the vegetables because they take a little bit of time to cook. So while I'm cooking them, I will talk a little bit about millet. So for this recipe, I am going to water saute my vegetables, and what that involves is, rather than using oil, which is unnecessary fat and calories, I'm using about a quarter cup of water. And I pour that in the pan just until it starts to bubble. And when it does heat up, there we go, it's just starting to simmer. And I'm adding 1.5 cups of diced carrot. So that's going in. 1 cup of diced celery, and 1 cup of diced white onion with a clove of garlic, which you can't see because it's the same color, but there's a minced clove of garlic in there as well. Okay. And the key to water sauteing is to keep mixing at the beginning. Have it on a medium heat and keep mixing at the beginning. And if the water evaporates, which it will, when it evaporates, add a little bit more. So keep a cup of water beside you. And the vegetables will start to release their water as well. But if it sticks, that's absolutely fine. Just put some more water in, scrape it up, and deglaze the pan, and that just adds to the flavor. And it makes it very, very tasty. So talking a little bit about millet. So millet is a grain. It's a grass seed. So it's considered a cereal grain. And 97% of millet is consumed in Africa and Asian countries. And in fact, millet is thought to be one of the earliest grains that was cultivated, which allowed agriculture to be established and allowed settlements, people to settle in one place, which is thought to be the beginning of civilization as we know it. And in archaeological digs, they have found millet grains and the instruments to grind the millet dating back about 10,000 years ago. And it was thought to actually be more common than rice. And the benefit of millet is it's a very hardy plant, so it grows well under difficult climate. And it's, as with all cereal grains, it's very high in protein and fiber and the B vitamins, and it's very low in fat. So let me just show you, while this is cooking, let me just show you, it's a bit difficult with the camera this far away, but this is pearl millet, so it's a small, fine seed grain, and it's very easy to cook. And what I have here is millet that I've made already, and it involves measuring out, cooking 1 volume of dried millet, rinse it first in a sieve under the tap, but 1 volume of dried millet grain to 1.5 volumes of water. So what I have here is 1.5 cups of millet, dried millet, which I have simmered with 3 3/4 cups of water. And once it comes to a boil, turn the burner down, turn the heat down, and just let it simmer for 20 minutes. And you can just leave it. Just put the lid slightly ajar and just let it cook. So it's very no fuss. And you can see here it comes out like a slightly clumping grain. Okay? And it smells a little bit. It has a bit of the smell of oats, of oatmeal. Speaking of which, one of the other benefits of millet is it's gluten-free. Okay? For people with celiac disease or gluten intolerance, it is gluten-free. I better make sure I don't forget my vegetables here. I won't have anything to add to it. And so once the onion is translucent, you don't want to overcook the vegetables. You don't want to dry them out, but you do want to saute them a bit. Do that a little bit longer. The other thing about millet is being a grain. Some of you may have heard of the Framingham Heart Study, which is a study which looked at thousands of people and what they ate and what their health outcomes have been. And it followed these people, these thousands of people over several decades. And it seemed to be quite clear that people who ate 3 servings of grain a day had much lower risk of heart disease. Now that in part is because they think because of the fiber and the B vitamins in the grain, but also if one is eating whole grains, one is not eating one is less likely to be eating highly processed white flour ingredients. So it's a combination of the two. But whole grains are very good for you. They have a very good health profile. So the vegetables are cooked, and I've put the still hot millet in here. So I'm going to combine them now. And it's, as I say, it's a simple recipe because what I do now is mix everything together, and I'll put it in a loaf pan, but let's do this. So as I say, millet can clump a little bit. What you don't want to happen is when you cook the millet, don't let it dry out too much because you want this moisture in the millet. Okay, the first time I made this, quite a while ago, I got it wrong and I let the millet dry out, and then there wasn't enough moisture in the dish. And here I have some toasted sunflower seeds. And all this required is a cup of sunflower seeds, raw sunflower seeds. I bake them flat in a pan at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius, 350 Fahrenheit for 10 minutes, and stir them once in between. And they give a nice, crunch to the recipe. I have 3 tablespoons of mixed herbs, okay? And I've got my jar here because I haven't committed to memory the mixed herbs. In England we say herbs, just if you're wondering. As a Canadian, it took me a while to get used to that, but it's mixed herbs. In England they pronounce the H. There's a little bit of cultural information for you. What am I looking at? So it's thyme, marjoram, parsley, oregano, sage, and basil. Okay, so 3 tablespoons of that. A tablespoon of dried rosemary. Okay, and a teaspoon, as you like it. I've got a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And mix this all together. So yeah, so millet is much more commonly eaten in Central African countries and Asian countries, and in many of those countries it's actually a staple of the diet. So if you were looking for, in the UK and North America, we do really limit ourselves to wheat, oats, grains like that, and sometimes it's just fun to try different grains and see what you think of them. And this one is quite tasty, but it doesn't have an overpowering flavor, which means that you can dress it up with all of these herbs without any sort of competing flavors. So I've got that, so I've mixed that together, and I now have 3 tablespoons of whole wheat flour. So I'm putting that in, and that helps as a binding agent. Okay, there we go. So I mix that all together. And what I'm going to do now is put it in a loaf pan. Okay, so give it a good stir. It's still warm. And if it's still warm, bake it for a little less time. If you've let everything go cold, then you need to bake it for a little bit longer. Okay. So I have a loaf pan, and the easiest thing is to line the loaf pan with grease-proof paper. And lining it is sort of like wrapping a Christmas present in reverse. You shove it in and fold the edges the other way. And I won't take you through all of that because you don't need to see me putting it in the loaf pan. But basically you fill the loaf pan, and you'll have 2 loaf pans worth. And then what you end up with, here's one I prepared earlier. What you have after baking, I baked this still when the ingredients are still warm, so I baked it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. In England we use Celsius. 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 50 minutes. All right, and you have a really nice crunchy topping, sort of a dressing or a stuffing flavor loaf, which goes beautifully with the Thanksgiving vegetables and gravy and potatoes. And this is how it looks when you slice it. And I don't know if you can see there, but it's a nice crunchy topping and a nice soft center. And the other benefit of this is you can freeze it. So if you slice it in the portions that you want, wrap it up in greaseproof paper, and you can put it in the freezer. So there we go, and pull it out when you want it. So that's everything. As I say, it's quite a simple recipe. You cook the millet at the beginning, and then you just throw everything in together and bake it and forget about it. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be interested to know if you tried it for your Thanksgiving dinner. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to hand you over to Jen in Louisiana, who is going to show us how she makes her basmati and wild rice pilaf.
Wow, Nancy, that looks so fabulous. I'm sorry that you live so far away. I'd invite myself over for dinner. Hi, everybody. I am Jen, and I'm in Louisiana, and I am here today to make my basmati and wild rice pilaf. And I'm really here to show you how easy it is to make something delicious and oil-free for Thanksgiving or any time of year, because this is a delicious, delicious dish. So before we start talking about what wild rice and basmati is, I want to get the vegetables started. They do take a little bit of time. So we're going to begin with a hot pan. So my pan has been heating up, and the way you can tell it's hot is if you put a little water in it, and if it beads and dances around, it is ready to start sauteing. And I am going to start with the onions. So I have a half of a medium onion here. I'm going to put it in the pan. The reason I'm starting with onions, there's a lot of water in onions. And a lot of the ingredients have natural waters and fats that go ahead and release into the pan, so you don't need to start with any oils or anything like that. If it starts to dry out and stick, we're going to add some vegetable stock. And I actually made my vegetable stock with some bouillon. You can find in the store now this chicken flavor. They're called no chicken bouillon, and it really helps mimic the flavors that people are looking for at Thanksgiving. Okay, so I'm going to let this cook up a little bit, and now I'm going to add my mushrooms, because I want my mushrooms to get nice and brown and caramelized. I just love the flavor that they have. So I have a 8-ounce pack of mushrooms that I finely diced, and I did want to share with you a little tip when you're looking at mushrooms if you want to see how fresh they are. The mushrooms have a white, you can see that, I'll hold it still, there is a little white membrane, I guess, that attaches to the stem. And if it's fully intact and you can't see inside the mushroom cap, then it is younger, fresher. Not like this one where you can see that it has pulled away from the stem. Just a quick little tip for you on mushrooms. So I'm going to go ahead and add this 8-ounce packet of finely diced mushrooms. So for a pilaf, you want things to be finely diced. And we're going to let that cook. This is over medium heat, by the way. And I am going to add a little bit of the veg stock that I made. So this, just a little bit, to keep it from sticking. And that flavor that's in there is going to be absorbed by the vegetables. So while that is cooking up and browning, let's talk about the rices that we're using in this dish. So first we're using basmati rice. I'm using a brown basmati rice, and I highly recommend using brown rice. It has all the fiber intact. The fiber has not been stripped away. The minerals and vitamins that are in the outer shell of the rice are there. They have not been stripped away, so the rice doesn't have to be refortified. Plus, it has a lot more fiber than the white rice, so highly recommended. Basmati is an aromatic rice. You can certainly use regular long grain rice or jasmine rice, whatever rice you want in this dish, but the basmati rice gives this dish a great, great flavor. And brown rice is a little bit nuttier flavoring, so it's really good. Now let's talk about wild rice. So wild rice, if you're not familiar with it, is actually not a rice at all. Wild rice is a seed that's grown in aquatic grasses. So it's mostly grown along riverbeds, along grass, much like rice is grown, but it is the seed from the grass. It's a whole grain. It is very nutrient dense, which means it has a lot of nutrients and a low calorie count. It does contain a lot more protein than rice. It's actually considered a complete protein, which means it has all 9 amino acids that your body does not make for itself. So you can use this like quinoa or so is considered a whole grain and a complete protein. It's really, really good stuff. Oh, I wanted to show you what it looked like when it's dry. I can hold that to the camera if you can see. It looks like rice, which is why they call it wild rice, but it is actually the seed. Okay, and in the interest of time for this show, I did go ahead and cook my rices up ahead. So what you're going to do is make a cup of basmati rice and a cup of wild rice, and you're going to boil those in water. And I do it a lot like I do pasta. I put the rice in boiling water and I cook it for about 35 minutes for the brown basmati rice, and it's ready to go. And this is what a cup of rice looks like when it's cooked. It gets about 3 cups. It about triples in size. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the bowl. And since I make this ahead, I did drain and rinse this rice with cold water when I finished, because I'm making it ahead. If we were going to eat it right after the show for dinner, I wouldn't rinse it off. When you rinse it off, it cools it. It stops the cooking process. But if we were going to eat it right away, I would keep the rice warm and add the warm veggies to it. Okay, and here is what the wild rice looks like once it is cooked. So the grain pops open, the seed pops open, and you can see a little bit of white in there. And this was a cup of dried rice, or dried wild rice, and it takes longer than the basmati rice to cook. It took about 45 minutes. So you bring it to a boil, you turn the heat down to about a medium low. You don't want it to boil over. You just make sure it's always submerged in the water. And when it's popped, give it a little taste, make sure the texture is good, and then drain it, and rinse it in cold water if you're not using it right away. Okay, we are still cooking with the vegetables here. All right, so this is our peel off. I'm going to mix these up together. And what we're going to do is add the mixed vegetables in with that. As you can see, I don't need to add a lot of liquid to this. There's a lot of liquid in mushrooms. There's a lot of liquid in onions. And it is cooking in there nicely. Okay, I'm going to add some celery in here. So this is 2 stalks. My stalks were kind of a medium stalk celery. So add some celery. You could add as much or a little of any of these ingredients as you like. Celery helps with salt flavors. It kind of is naturally salty in a way. So it helps reduce the amount of actual salt you have to add to foods. I'm going to continue to cook this, and now we're going to add some kale. So we all know kale is the superfood. If you haven't heard that by now, I'm telling you, kale is a superfood. It's loaded with protein. It's loaded with everything that you need, basically, pretty much. And you should eat some kale every day. So this is 3 stalks of kale that I finely chopped. And actually, I chopped this up in my food processor because I don't want bigger leafy portions in the rice peel-off. And it's a good idea to do that when you're going to cook it, especially if you're cooking for any elderly over the holidays that have trouble chewing the kale. If you finally chop it up, then they can manage it easier. I'm going to add this in here. And that right there just boosted the nutritional value of this dish tenfold. Okay, so now that we've got most of these veggies in here, I'm going to go ahead and add the seasoning. So this is a half a teaspoon thyme, a half a teaspoon savory, and a half a teaspoon sage. And at this point, you can also add additional salt, or any salt really if you want, and pepper for seasoning, but I'm going to keep my spices to a minimum today. And the last, I'm going to add, this is not the last, but I'm also going to add, this is 1 Granny Smith apple finely diced. So apples, as you know, are healthy. Keep apple a day, doctor away. Just you're eating a lot of fiber in here, and you're getting a fruit with your meal. So you can add that on your fruit list. And I do leave the skins on the apples because a lot of nutrients are concentrated in the skin. This is finely diced. So again, if you're having elderly over for dinner, don't have to worry about them being able to manage chewing on those apple skins. You can, like I said, use any apple you like. A tart apple is really, really good in this dish. We're also adding some pecans because, hey, it's the holidays. And that's adding an extra boost of protein in there as well. There we go. We're sauteing that up nicely. And then last, to add a little bit of sweetness, I have some cranberries here. These were dried cranberries that I reconstituted, if you want to say that, in water. To soften them up. You know, the dried cranberries can get pretty hard to chew and dense. Well, I soaked them in hot water for about 15 minutes, and then I drained them really, really well. Added it to our dish. And that is basically it. You can see I hardly needed to use any of my vegetable broth because of all the natural liquids that are in your food. This is oil-free. So here's our bowl of rice and I'm going to go ahead and just toss this mixture in there. Such an easy, easy dish. Give that a nice stir. You can see this makes a huge bowl of pilaf with so few ingredients, but it is a very, very versatile dish. So you can serve it just like this. And when your holidays come, if you want to reheat it in the oven, that's awesome. You might want to add a little broth so it doesn't dry out in the oven, but put it in a baking dish, put a little broth in there, cover it, and reheat it at 350. I also wanted to show you one other thing that's great to do with it. Make a stuffing for your acorn squash. So this is an acorn squash that I had pre-baked. So I put it in the oven upside down in the oven at 400 degrees for about 40 minutes until it was soft to touch. You don't want it so soft that the skin is popping off. But you can fill your acorn squash with some of this mixture. And I would put this back in the oven and bake it at 400 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes till it's heated through. This is something you can prepare ahead and pull it out on your special occasion and just heat it in the oven and it's ready to go. And look how pretty that is. Right before serving, I would sprinkle it with a little fresh parsley. It just gives it a little extra color. And now to this, if you want to add a little extra protein boost, I have taken extra firm tofu. I squeezed it and I cubed it, small cubes. And then I mixed it with a little veg stock and this awesome seasoning. If you have a Trader Joe's near you, they have this everything but the leftover seasoning, which is really, really awesome seasoning. I sprinkled it on here. You can also use the same seasonings that are in the recipe or even just poultry seasoning. And you can add this and it gives it an extra protein boost for you. So I'm going to do that because I love this. And now, the final thing with this dish, it's a lot. So if you're not going to eat it all, portion it out, put it in the freezer, and pull it out from time to time. It's loaded with these great seasonal flavors. It's a healthy dish. It has healthy grains, vegetables, fruit, everything in there. So it's just a wonderful dish, and I love it this time of year, especially with those seasonings. So that's it for me, and this is my basmati and wild rice pilaf. And now I'm going to turn you over to Melissa Sherlock, and she is making garlic roasted green beans with shallots and almonds. Melissa, I might be coming over to your house for dinner.
Hi everybody, we're talking Thanksgiving dishes today, and I'm going to show you how to make a very simple, easy roasted green beans with shallots and garlic. Usually at Thanksgiving, it's very traditional to have the soupy green bean casserole with canned green beans. and fried onions on top. And if you like that, if that's traditional for you, by all means make it. I prefer fresh green beans and I want them to be a little al dente. So this is a dish that I really like at Thanksgiving. Normally I just steam my green beans, but we want to dress them up a little bit for Thanksgiving, and this is so easy to do that. So we're going to start with trimmed green beans, 1 pound. Now I went ahead and bought already trimmed green beans at Trader Joe's, and then I only had to cut them in half. So we have the green beans, and mostly our dish is going to be getting all of its flavor from shallots that look like this, and garlic. Now, the shallots and garlic are from the allium family of vegetables, which have huge amounts of antioxidants. They include shallots and garlic, but of course, onions, chives, scallions, things like that, leeks also. And that family of vegetables is one of the healthiest family of vegetables, along with the cruciferous vegetables. They have huge antioxidants, and they literally have been shown to slow tumor growth. So when your dish starts with onions and garlic, like mine always do, not only is that adding huge amounts of flavor, it's also really healthy for you. So is all we do. I have the shallots already cut in thin slices, about 3 large shallots, or maybe you want to use more 4 if they're smaller. That's where all your flavor is coming from. And then it calls for 5 cloves of garlic. But I like the saying that don't ever let a recipe tell you how much garlic to use, because you measure that with your heart. And we like garlic at our house, and so I used more than 5 cloves, but don't skimp on the garlic. Your flavor does come from there. So I have also sliced that pretty thin, not paper thin, because you don't want it to roast ahead of the green beans. And then we have toasted sliced almonds. And the way that we do that is we just put the almond slices in a skillet, in a dry skillet. And what I would do is turn up the heat to high and use a wooden spoon, and I'm just constantly moving around those sliced almonds. You don't want to leave them alone, and you just keep doing that on high. You can do it on pretty high heat if you're watching it, until they're lightly toasted. So then is all you do is you take your green beans. We're going to add all of these nice sliced shallots and all of the garlic. And we're going to mix that up. Now, to coat the green beans and the garlic and the shallots, instead of using oil, I have just created a mix of veggie broth and balsamic glaze to make it a little bit thicker to coat the vegetables. So balsamic glaze is a reduction sauce of balsamic vinegar. It goes on really thick and it's a little sweeter. I like to say that balsamic glaze makes everything look and taste more gourmet. So that's what we have. The thickness of the balsamic glaze helps it coat the vegetables. So you need about 2 or 3 tablespoons combined. I usually use about 2 tablespoons of glaze and 1 of veggie broth. And then you're going to just keep stirring it onto these vegetables until they're really well coated and there's not a lot of moisture in the bottom. It's as simple as that. And then in your casserole pan, I'm using one that's about this size. So if you have a big family and you want to use a 9x13, you might want to get 2 pounds of green beans. But we are going to put the green beans, shallots, and garlic into this pot. You can see we've got a lot of goodies in there because, again, that's where all the flavor is going to come from. Now you can add some salt and pepper here I am not salt-free, so I do add a little bit of salt. I like to grind it on. So I'm going to grind on some pepper. And again, this is to taste. We really love black pepper in our family, so I give it a lot. And then some salt, just a little bit, because you can always salt it at the table. Okay, so then I arrange it. I just arrange it in here, and I'm gonna put that in an oven that is 450 degrees, and that is going to roast these. I roast them, I check them at about 30 minutes, and how long you roast them will depend on your likeness for al dente green beans or have them more done. Now, if you're using oil, you need less time than that because the oil will really help roast those faster and they start to kind of shrink up a little bit. I like to cook oil-free, so I'm not going to use those. I'm going to put this in my oven, and when it comes out, I've got one that I baked off here. You can see the wonderful caramelized, garlic, and the shallots and the green beans are nicely roasted. And that is when we will add our toasted almonds. I've got some extras here because I want to keep some for another dish. You can use as many of those as you want, like this. And then I like to also add a little drizzle of the balsamic glaze. This is a big bottle that I got at Costco, and I usually do it at an angle, and you can see how thick it is. And so I'll go back and forth a couple of times, and this just adds a great finishing touch to the dish. So again, this is roasted green beans with shallots and garlic and topped with toasted almonds. It is quite simple, but when this is in the oven, it will make your whole kitchen smell of wonderful smells of Thanksgiving. And you can also put this in the oven with other things that don't roast at 450, but you'll have to leave it in longer. So you can either roast it at 450 by itself or with other dishes, maybe at a lower temperature for a longer amount of time. You could also roast it off and then just warm it with the other foods as well. So isn't that a beautiful dish for your Thanksgiving table? I really hope you enjoy it. I want to tell you all, thank you for joining us with So Many Cooks in the Kitchen, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And now I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne Fellows in Michigan.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you, Melissa. Your green beans looked absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite holiday meals. Today, I'm going to be making something else for you. We're having a butternut squash souffle. Most people would first respond with, how do you make a souffle vegan? Souffle traditionally is made with eggs, and you separate the egg whites from the egg yolks. You fluff up the egg whites to a stiff meringue-like texture, and then you fold those into the egg yolks and you create souffle. But being vegan, I don't eat eggs, and the advantage to that is that this recipe will not have any cholesterol. We will still have some fat from the coconut milk, but no cholesterol in this recipe. So it's a great way to have a souffle-like dish as part of our Thanksgiving meal. And so you may be thinking to yourself, how do you make a souffle without eggs? So the trick to this is called Aquafaba. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar, but it's actually made with the juice or the water from which beans are cooked. And it's very readily available and very inexpensive because you can buy a can of chickpeas, drain them, save that water from the can, and refrigerate it. And the refrigeration really helps when you go to use the aquafaba to fluff it up and whip it up. It takes a few minutes and it takes a lot of work. So that is why I use a stand mixer, which actually doesn't require any work at all. It just takes a little bit of patience. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how beautiful this is. And it's these stiff meringue peaks that you can see there, that it's stuck right to the whip on the blender. And this is actually one of the tricks, is to use a stand mixer and to use this attachment that acts like a whisk. And it's amazing that that is not made from egg whites. It is made from aquafaba. And the other advantage is that not only is this good for soufflés, but you can even make lemon meringue pie. You can use it as an egg substitute in baked goods. It is so easy to work with and so delicious. It really provides a lot of moisture and texture, just like an egg would. So these are our aquafaba egg whites. I already went ahead and did it because it does take a few minutes and it's loud, and so I didn't want to have to do that now. So I can just share the end product with you, and it really is so easy to make. So this is our aquafaba, which will fold into the recipe in just a minute. But first I want to talk about butternut squash, because once you really need to prepare your butternut squash and have it ready to go, so that once this is all whipped up, you can easily fold it into your recipe. So right here, I cheated a little bit and I used already cubed butternut squash today. And you can also do this with frozen pureed butternut squash. You can just use frozen butternut squash, or you can purchase a butternut squash. The biggest danger to butternut squash is cutting it. So it can be a little bit risky. So what I always recommend doing before you try to cut this in half or try to cut off the ends is heat it up a little bit. So either put it in your oven for 15 minutes at 350 degrees, or even just in the microwave for 4 to 5 minutes, and it'll soften it up and make it much safer to cook, or to cut rather. And you can also use a winter squash in this recipe. Personally, this particular recipe today, I made sweet, but if you're going to use a winter nut squash for this recipe, I would recommend making it savory by adding maybe some onion powder, garlic, salt, pepper, and making it a savory dish. So one of the things in this recipe that I have, which is sometimes hard to find, but I was lucky enough to find them, and those are vegan marshmallows. So if you don't have access to vegan marshmallows, no worries at all. The recipe really doesn't need it. It's just maybe a little bit of a topper and makes it look pretty, but completely not necessary to still have a delicious squash souffle. So we already went ahead and cut up and steamed our squash and use the immersion blender to give it this nice blended texture. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of our ingredients. And so that is a tablespoon of maple syrup. Again, this is not too sweet. I just use 1 tablespoon. You can use 2 if you like things a little bit sweeter, or even if you wanted to use this as a dessert dip. Another way to serve this is after you bring it out of the oven, you can even serve it with some graham crackers and dip it and use it as a dip. It's delicious that way too. So I went ahead and added the syrup. Here I have coconut milk. This coconut milk happened to be from a can, but you can also just use any one of your favorite non-dairy milks. I went ahead and strained off the fattier portion of this coconut milk because I used it from a can. But you can use any non-dairy milk that you enjoy. So this is a 1/4 cup of coconut milk, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then it'll be a 1/2 teaspoon or even a full teaspoon of cinnamon, depending upon what you prefer. I happen to like a lot of cinnamon, so I'll kind of do more of like a heaping half. So that's probably the equivalent of 1. But the great thing about this recipe is that it's sweet and it can be savory. It's an awesome side dish and it's full of fiber. Butternut squash is super healthy. Actually, all squashes are super healthy. They contain a lot of fiber, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, antioxidants, beta carotene. And the advantage to that is that those foods, especially beta carotene and antioxidants, they are very protective. They're protective for our brain. They're protective of our cells to help prevent cancer. And they're protective of our brain with memory decline, and they are just an all-around great food to enjoy. So this is a really good dish because you know that you're feeding your family things that do not contain cholesterol. This is also very low salt. If you are using the canned aquafaba versus making your own beans, choose the low salt, or in this case, I did not have the low salt can this time, so I didn't add any salt to the recipe. If you use no salt when you make your beans, you can add a little bit of salt to this recipe. Now I'm just going to go ahead and mix this up. And then once this is mixed really well, you can even use the immersion blender again to mix this together. And once this is mixed, we're going to go ahead and fold in very gently. We're going to fold in the aquafaba. And the reason you want to do it gently, and the reason that the aquafaba gets to those fluffy peaks, is because they contain a lot of air. And that's why it's really good to use a stand mixer as opposed to a whisk or a hand mixer. It's harder to get the speed even from a hand mixer that the stand mixer can get with this attachment. And it really folds in and whips up the air into the chickpea water very quickly, and it creates those stiff peaks. The other thing that I added to that was a little bit, just a quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar. And that's really, the aquafaba will whip up without it, but it will actually maintain its peaks with it. So that's why it's important to use it to help prevent it from falling as it's in the oven baking, or even right now as we mix the two together. So we're going to go ahead and mix this up. And believe it or not, this huge amount that it fluffed up to was only 3/4 cup of aquafaba. So we're going to go ahead and mix it in little by little. Stir a couple times, fold it gently, and then we'll do it again. I like to kind of break it up into 2 parts. And then once this is folded together, we will go ahead and put it into a prepared baking dish and have your oven ready and set at 350 degrees. So this is just really easy. You just continue to fold it and mix it up. You don't want to be too aggressive with it, but you do need it to mix together. And you don't want to have to do it for too long so that you don't collapse the aquafaba. But you'll be able to tell. And we're almost there. Maybe a couple more spins around. And we are, I would say, ready to pour it in. And you can choose to use small ramekins. You can choose to use a casserole dish. I have already prepared here a pie dish. And I'm going to go ahead and just already show you the final production. So here is the souffle made without any of the marshmallows on top. But here, in a smaller thing, I went ahead and I sprinkled the marshmallows on top and put it under the broiler. Right after this was done, you just go ahead and sprinkle it, and you can either put it under the broiler for a minute, watch it so it does not catch fire very, very carefully, or you can just place it right back in the oven at the 350 degrees for just another couple minutes. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And one other thing I'd like to say is how grateful I am for our So Many Cooks in the Kitchen group. I really feel so fortunate and appreciative of everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Susanna, who will be showing us some delicious Brussels sprouts. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, Suzanne, thanks so much. That looks just so delicious. I can't wait to try it. My name is Susanna Dickman, and I'm from Evansville, Indiana. And today I'm going to make you what has become one of my favorite holiday dishes and my favorite vegetable, and that is Brussels sprouts. As a child, I really never liked Brussels sprouts. I think most children don't. Mostly because I think my mother boiled them and they just were not that good. Today I'm going to saute them with a little bit of different vinegars and tamari and some red onions, and then top them with pomegranate seeds. And the reason you need to really eat Brussels sprouts is they really are a superfood. They are high in potassium, vitamin C, vitamin K, omega-3 fatty acids. They are high in protein. So a cup of Brussels sprouts will give you 3 grams of protein. I'm going to start my recipe, and I'm going to put my burner on medium-high. I always like to cook on medium-high, never high heat. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my red onions. I sliced them fairly thin. This might be a little more than a cup and a half. Again, I love red onions. And remember, the higher the antioxidant, or the deeper the color of your vegetable or fruit, the higher the antioxidants. So I like to choose red onions because they are high in antioxidants. You can see I'm not using any oil. I will use a little bit of water. Let me grab my pitcher of water, just to add a splash of water when things are starting to stick. Next, I'm going to add my garlic, and I did chop that really thin. I like a lot of garlic, so I will put in maybe 6 cloves. You can put in 2 or 3 or 1, but I like more. I'm going to add just a splash of water. Okay, I don't want to add a lot because you don't need a lot. But remember, we don't cook with oil. So water, or you could use vegetable broth if you want. But I want to saute these until they become translucent. I'm not going to add any more water. I'm just kind of going to sweat them out. And I'm going to put my lid on because we know the heat, the steam will help the cooking process. Then I'm going to add my liquid ingredients in just a minute. And I think they're looking good. So what I have here is some balsamic vinegar. I have some apple cider vinegar, and I have some tamari. You can use tamari sauce, you can use soy sauce, you can use liquid aminos. It's your choice. But I'm going to add in this mixture. It's going to give that kind of tart flavor. I love especially the apple cider vinegar. I think it has a very unique flavor all its own. This is about a teaspoon of garlic powder. I'm going to get some more of that liquid out because we don't want to waste it. And I'm going to let this incorporate a little bit before I add my Brussels sprouts. Let me show you my Brussels sprouts while that's cooking. So I tried to cut them fairly thin because I want them to cook evenly. And these were really big Brussels sprouts, and they were really fresh. I was really excited to find these in my local grocery store. The pomegranate seeds I'm going to add on top. Remember, antioxidants, so they are dark red, and they just add, I think, a festive nature, and they add a little bit more flavor. All right, I think our onions are just about done. And oh my goodness, I wish we had smell-o-vision because I wish you could smell this. It just smells so good. Let me go ahead and get my Brussels sprouts in there. I'm going to grab them all and put them in. And then we're going to make sure we stir them up so that they are all incorporated. and they all have some of our sauce mixture on them. Okay. It always looks like you're not going to have enough room in your bowl, in your pan, right? But they will cook down, as you know, and so I will have enough. So I'm just going to stir these because I want to make sure that all of the sprouts get some of that liquid mixture on them, coating them well. So this is the time when you need to be careful and have patience, because I know I flipped Brussels sprouts right out of the pan onto the floor because I wanted to get it done quickly. I'm just going to make sure they're all covered. And as I said again, you know, include Brussels sprouts at your holiday table. They're in season now at, you know, it doesn't even have to be a holiday, just at any meal, because you're getting also cancer-fighting compounds. You know, Brussels sprouts are a cruciferous vegetable, and they are just so good for you any way you make them. And I hope that you will try this new way of sauteing. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit. And I think that, you know, again, as I said with the water, I don't want to add a lot of water. I'm going to add just a splash in a minute because we don't want to dilute the flavor of the cider vinegar and the balsamic vinegar and the tamari. So I'm just going to add a little splash. So let me just do that. When I say splash, I'm talking maybe a half to a tablespoon. You don't want it to be really wet. One more mix, and you can see they're starting. You can see some of the brown because I've gotten some of the sauce on there. Now I'm just going to put on my lid. These are going to saute for 15 to 20 minutes. It depends on how thick your Brussels sprouts are, how many you have. You want to come back and, you know, check them in 5 minutes. I don't like my vegetables to be too soft. I like to have that crunch. So I'll check it in 5 minutes and test for doneness. We all have our preference when we're eating vegetables. So, you know, it's up to you how soft you want them to be. Once they're done, I'll plate them, and you can see here are some that I made before with the Brussels sprout, with the pomegranate seeds on them, and oh my goodness, this plate wouldn't last long in my house. It would be gone. But enjoy your holiday meals, your family get-togethers, and enjoy some Brussels sprouts with red onion and pomegranate seeds. Thanks so much for watching and spending your Saturday with us. Next up is Karen Osborne from Austin, Texas. And Karen, I always love your recipes, so I'm so excited to see what you're going to be making. It's all yours, Karen.
Thanks, Susanna. That looks delicious. Hi, and welcome to my kitchen here in Austin, Texas. I'm Karen Osborne, myfoodfitnessandfun.com. And we have been watching all of these yummy recipes for your Thanksgiving table, but I'm going to show you something that a lot of the time you also have to plan, you know, for what are you going to serve your guests for breakfast or for snacks. A lot of times you have out-of-town company for the holidays, and you are thinking about that big meal, but you're also thinking about the whole rest of the time that your company is going to be here. So I'm going to show you a really quick, easy cookie with all the holiday flavors. And this cookie is so healthy, you could have it for breakfast or for snacks. You can make a whole bag full of these, keep them in your freezer. You can eat them right out of the freezer or let them thaw out for a few minutes if you want, or eat them warm from the oven. They're really good. I have preheated my oven to 375 degrees, and I've lined 2 cookie sheets with parchment paper so they won't stick. We're using no oil in these cookies. I'm just going to go over the ingredients really quick, and then I'll show you how easy it is to put them together. You don't need any special equipment besides a bowl and a fork. I'm going to scoop the cookies out with my little scoop here, but you could just use a spoon, would be fine. All right, so I have a butternut squash, well, another butternut squash that I have steamed and mashed. And butternut squash is a good source of beta carotene and vitamins E and C, which are all antioxidants, good for your cardiovascular system. And also they have the B vitamins, which are needed to make the red blood cells, and the B vitamins are needed for your cells to make energy. And they also have magnesium, potassium, and manganese, which is good for your bone health. And then I also have bananas, which are full of potassium, which is good for your blood pressure and your cardiovascular system. And also what they do in this recipe, we're not using any oil. So bananas they have a fiber, a soluble fiber, which breaks down into a gel in water. And it's actually good for your digestive system. That soluble fiber gives the spongy texture, and so that's what makes it a good substitute for oil in our recipes. I also have vanilla and cinnamon flavors of the season, and so the bananas and the butternut squash and the cinnamon are sweet. My bananas are ripe enough that I don't need any extra sweetener. If you have bananas that are not too ripe, you might want a little extra sweetener like date sugar or something. Up to you, it's optional. Then I usually use orange zest in my recipe, but I haven't been able to find an organic orange lately here, so I'm using organic orange oil. And if you're substituting orange oil for the orange zest, you just need a few drops. It's very strong. What else do I have? Okay, I have oats, which are, these are rolled oats, good source of fiber, beta-glucans, which actually feeds the good bacteria in your gut, and also helps you feel full so you don't crave a lot of junk. It's got lots of minerals for your bones. And then I have ground a little bit of the oats into a flour. So the rolled oats are going to give the cookies their texture, and then the flour is going to combine with the moist ingredients, the banana and the butternut squash, and the baking powder to react and rise a bit to give our cookies a good texture. Okay, so then the last thing I have is, besides salt, I'm just using 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. If you're not using salt, you can leave it out. Salt just brings out the sweetness in all the ingredients. But it works fine without salt. And then I have the cranberries, which I have sliced really thin. Cranberries are a good source of antioxidants, and they have one antioxidant. It's proanthocyanidins, which actually can reduce the risk of stomach cancer because it prevents H. pylori from attaching to your stomach lining. So all of these ingredients are good sources of fiber. So you can see how we have just this really simple, healthy cookie, which actually could be a meal. So let's get started putting this together. I'm just going to move a little bit of the things out of the way, and we're going to put our steamed butternut squash into a mixing bowl, and our 2 bananas. I'm just going to combine all the moist ingredients. We're going to, and our seasonings. So I'm going to put the cinnamon in, and about 4 drops of this organic orange oil. and my little bit of salt, and my vanilla. And then I'm just going to mash this all up with a fork. So you could do this in a food processor if you wanted to, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is and that you don't really need any special equipment to have a healthy, delicious holiday cookie. And this works too if you have, if you keep bananas in your freezer for smoothies or banana ice cream. You can just take a few bananas out and thaw them out, and that's even easier to mix up. Still works because they, when they freeze, they expand a bit. The liquid in there like breaks the cell walls. And they're pretty watery and easy to mix up. This, we just want to mash it until it's smooth. And it smells so good already. I smell the cinnamon and the orange. Enough, and then we're going to put the cranberries in. So like I said, I just sliced them really thin so they disperse into all of the cookies. Just going to mix that up. Really smelling like orange with just those 4 drops of orange oil. Okay, so you can see that's good and moist, and I'm just going to add the oats and the oat flour and get that all mixed in. So it's really good, a little sweetness from the banana and the cinnamon and the squash. And then you have the tartness of the cranberries. All right, so all those oats are moistened. And now we're going to add the baking powder. So the baking powder is, you can buy baking powder or make it. I make it with just 2 parts cream and tartar and 1 part of baking soda, and just keep it in an airtight jar in my pantry. And I'm just going to add 1/2 teaspoon. And then I'm going to stir it really quick. And then while it's reacting, get it on the cookie sheet. So you just want to kind of mix it in, and you can kind of hear it bubble a little bit. You're not going to see it, but you will notice it when it's cooking. So, like I said, you can use a spoon, but I'm going to use a little scoop. And just drop them onto the cookie sheet. And you could just leave them like this, or you want to work fast to get them into the oven. So you can leave them like this, Or you can take the back of your spoon or the back of your scoop or the back of a fork and just flatten them out a little bit and get them into the oven at 375 for 20-25 minutes, maybe more. If you make bigger cookies, use a bigger scoop or a bigger spoon. And then when you take them out, just let them cool on the cookie sheet for about a minute and then transfer them to a wire baking rack to cool completely. And you have a very simple but delicious, healthy, full of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants and fiber, yummy cookie for your family or your guests, and enjoy. So happy Thanksgiving to you all, and thanks for joining us today. Now we're going to take a 1 to 2 minute break to get ready and then be back for Q&A. You should see us live in a separate stream soon.
All right. Thanks, Karen, for that. We thought we'd do things a little differently this time because sometimes there's a scramble, especially for the last person to get to Q&A. So at first we thought we might start another stream, but just hang tight. I'm just going to chat for a moment, and then as the cooks get ready, we'll bring them back in. Another great show. Hope you guys got a lot of good ideas. We had a Thanksgiving show last year, and that's why we're calling this So Many More Thanksgiving Dishes. And another comment. Thanks, Barry, for your comment. I agree. They were nice. They were nice cookies. So it looks like our cooks are coming back. Let me start bringing them in. Let's see. So there's Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn.
Hi, Delip. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you? Great presentation from you as always.
Well, thank you.
And
It seemed like the theme of the day today was pudding. We had a lot of puddings.
we have Mark is in the car, and he had after his segment had to head out, but he's so kind to still join for Q&A. So thank you, Mark. Drive safely, and you're in Chicago. That's what you're. It's in the 70s here, but
Oh my gosh, it's
North Carolina.
38 degrees, and I'm not driving. My wife's actually driving, so
Okay.
I'm safe.
All right. That was, I always love your presentations, Mark. You have such great humor. I love your artistic squash, so that was great.
That's about as artistic as I can get. So.
Well, I've heard on good word that you used to play in a band.
I did, yeah. Well, I used to play the trumpet and was on stage early in my life, and here I am now at almost 60 years old. In less than a month, well, a little bit over a month, I'll be 60 and on stage again. So here I go.
Wonderful. Happy almost birthday.
Thank
and we
you.
have Susanna who's come back. So thank you so much, Susanna. A great show. I always love what you have to share. And I was so lucky because Susanna actually sent me some wonderful apples from Indiana. And they were so good. My whole family loved them. So thanks so much for that, Susanna.
Oh, you're welcome. We're glad you enjoyed them.
We'll bring Nancy's back as well. Thanks, Nancy. The thing I love about your presentations is it's just so detailed, so rich, so wonderful. It's clear when I hear your presentations that I have so much more to learn.
True.
It's a great group to be part of. We all have so much to share, and we all have, I think, good knowledge that we learn from each other. So, so thanks for rejoining. I think Karen is almost back, so I'll give her another second to get up, and I think Jen will be ready soon. Oh, Jen is ready. Okay, so here's Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Great presentation. Somebody sent a message to me. And by the way, there's some feedback. You may want to mute yourself. But while Jen was presenting, somebody sent me a message saying that she looks like she's a professional Food Network TV presenter, and I agree. And looks like we can bring Karen in too as well. Hi, Karen again. And Jen, I'm going to mute you until you share because there's feedback from Jen. So Karen, you're another person that I just love when you present. I have so much to learn from all of you. You have such detailed knowledge as well about ingredients. And if our viewers didn't see it, Karen did an amazing video all about melons. Choosing melons, picking melons. I've used what I've learned from you with my own students, my own Food for Life students, Karen. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that's our crew today. I wanted to do a shout out to Cody and Tammy. So Tammy wasn't cooking with us today, but they're both cooks in the kitchen, and they're so industrious that Cody is now, and Tammy and a friend Tim are doing a 2-hour show that just started. That's why they're not in Q&A. Just started on they call it Thanks Living. I encourage you guys when you're done with us to move on over to Cooking on the Veg, which is Tammy's, and also Holistic Dish, which is Cody's. So anyhow, let's get to Q&A. We had some good questions come in from our web audience. I wanted to start with some of my own questions, and then we could move on to any other ones. So those of you who are watching, please post your questions. Carolyn, I wanted to start with you. One thing I love about your cooking is you use such interesting ingredients, and you combine them in such interesting ways. I like to do the same thing. I like to come up with new combinations. But when you combine mustard and cranberry, I don't think I'd ever have come up with that. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about what influenced you. Is this something that, because a lot of our viewers say, well, how do you make these things? Where do you come up with these ideas? And I want to know if you would please share how you did that. Is this an idea you came up with from another source? Is it your own idea? Are there nutritive benefits for doing that? Are there aesthetic benefits?
I think it's more flavor benefit. So like cranberry mustard sauce, I think I have seen that before on like deli sandwiches and things that you would get from a traditional deli that actually has meat and cheese, but I've seen that as an ingredient, on menus and things like that, cranberry and mustard sauce. And I thought, well, we could just put that on a leftover Thanksgiving sandwich. Let's take the leftover cranberry sauce and make something that you would put on a sandwich. And so to me, mustard is something I would put on a sandwich, but making it interesting, like making it a cranberry mustard, making it more seasonal just sounded good. So we just played with the ratio of it, and it was about a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 tablespoons leftover cranberry sauce to 1 tablespoon mustard. And you could use, maybe a German mustard or whatever, any other kind of mustard would be really good. But Dijon was what I had on hand, and it just sounded like it would be good on a sandwich. So we love sandwiches at our house, so we tend to take leftovers and just stick them on bread and eat them. So
as you were talking, it reminded me of something. A lot of people who are experimenting with any kind of cooking, it doesn't have to be vegan cooking, but any kind of cooking, note down things like ratios. So when you make it, you say, well, last time it was good. I wish there were more cranberries instead of 1 to 3. Maybe you do, 1 to 2 or whatever. But make it, or whatever it is. So make notes and keep index cards or put something on your computer. Is that how do you keep track of such things? These ratios? Do you have your own recipe book or something?
Have files. I have whole files on my computer. I have some of my own recipes that are called Carolyn's recipes on my computer, and then I have a whole bunch of other ones I've saved just under, appetizers, main dishes, soups and stews, salads, that kind of thing. And I make notes of it and put it on the computer where I can find it easily again, instead of having little bits of paper all over the kitchen. So.
Index cards work well, or they have, there are programs that you can buy. There's free programs where you can note things down. One thing I encourage our viewers is take our recipes as points of departure and make them your own. So I think Mark was talking about how he loves garlic and he adds extra garlic. And so, like in my family, my daughter doesn't like ginger, but ginger has lots of nutritive properties. It's great for the digestion. I taught Food for Life curriculum. A little later, we'll tell you more about what Food for Life is. In Kickstart, this was Kickstart 6, I guess, the 6th class in Kickstart, we talk about digestive health and ginger, and we made a wonderful ginger smoothie with ginger and fruit. It was really good, berries. So what I do in my house is to integrate ginger. I just use less of it. So if I have a recipe that I like, this much ginger, then I use this much ginger. I'm a math teacher, so I do a lot of hand waving. Mark, one thing in your presentation, you refer to, actually, it wasn't just today, but you have in the past talked about aquafaba. And today
Yes.
it was actually Susanna who was talking about aquafaba. It comes up a lot. And
Right.
nowadays, whenever I think of aquafaba, I often think of you because you're the first cook
Thanks.
in the kitchen way back when, where you talked about it. It's something that's, it seemed to be a fad, but it's
Right.
hung on. So because it came up a couple times, would you mind talking a little bit about aquafaba?
Sure. Yeah. So Aquafaba was, I guess, publicly kind of hit the internet about 5 or 6 years ago. And for everything I could tell, it was actually discovered and then marketed from a company in South Bend, Indiana. So not too far from where I live and not too far from where Suzanne Fellows lives, too. She's in central Michigan. So aquafaba is essentially the viscous liquid from chickpeas. So, when you drain that can of chickpeas out and you just use the beans, don't do that next time. Just take the aquafaba, and all you have to do is just whip that up like you would in egg whites back in the day. And after a few minutes, it gets nice and frothy, and you could whip it all the way up to stiff peaks, just like Suzanne did. Now, the one thing that she did talk about, and that I do as well, is I add cream of tartar in there, and that just stabilizes the peaks of the aquafaba. But you could add agave or maple syrup, similar to what Suzanne did. You can make baked meringues. If there's anybody listening that's at all a fan of the Great British Baking Show, they had several years ago, they had a vegan week, and they actually made a whole meringue cake with aquafaba. And just the current season 2, there was a vegan baker who got eliminated early on in I think, week 2 or 3, but she was using aquafaba. So it's pretty popular. It gives that nice, I'm all about mouthfeel. It gives a real similar mouthfeel that whipped cream gives. And it's just a really nice holiday thing, or any time of the year, in place of dairy whipped cream.
Yeah, I think Mark raises a good point. Mouthfeel is important, and well, let's bring Jen back on. We kind of lost her. Oops, I think she dropped, but hopefully we'll rejoin. Mouthfeel is important, and we in Food for Life we don't use oil. I think that Nancy said it really well. It's just wasted fat, wasted calories.
Right.
Why use it, right? And I tell my students, everybody has a different fat tolerance. In the Physicians Committee programs, Food for Life, we recommend 10% fat calories. And we go with 10% because every single study that talks about any kind of reversal, if you have any kind of buildup in your arteries, for example, if you're trying to reverse diabetes or anything like that, or just to stay healthy, all the studies show that the reversal goes away at 10%. But there are credible people that we respect who allow for a little bit more than 10%, maybe 12, 15, but everybody has a number, right? So whatever the fat is. And what I tell my students is I ask them, do you like chocolate? And I do. And chocolate definitely has fat. And if I'm going to eat, here's some more hand waving, this much fat, I'd rather reserve that for chocolate, please. I don't need that oil. And so what you said, Mark, I think is a good point that mouthfeel is really important. And since we often aren't using oil or using very minimal oil, it's good to find other things that could take the place of oil. So, and if you think about it, I shouldn't have said take the place. Oil isn't such a natural thing. Who would have thought of like squishing these olives or squishing rapeseed or whatever and coming up with oil? It's kind of weird. So it's not really a replacement. It's like going back to eating whole foods.
Right.
Nancy, you spent a lot of time talking about millet, and that was exciting. And I liked the history that you had shared about millet. Could you talk a little bit more about millet? Is it used in certain cultures more than others? Are there other grains that you particularly like? And can you talk a little bit about the glycemic load of grains like millet?
Now you're pushing me in my millet knowledge. But I've used millet a bit, and one of the nice things is that in terms of grains, the majority of grains that we all use is either wheat, rice, or oats, and they're all very healthy choices. But as a population, we don't tend to diverge from that a great deal. And there are, in fact, a huge number of different grains and cereal seeds and grass seeds. And they all bring something different to the table, literally and figuratively. And millet is a nice one because it actually has quite a sticky texture. So it's very good for loaves and pies and that kind of thing. And it's very, as with most grains, it's very high in protein and it's low in fat. And it's a very good source of the B vitamins as long as we have the whole grain. So as soon as we start to strip the husk off the grain, the outside bit, that outside bit is where we find the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals, including the B vitamins. So we want to have whole grains. We want to have brown rice instead of white rice. We want to have whole wheat instead of processed white flour. But the nice thing about millet is it's a different flavor and it's not one that we normally have. And I quite enjoy, and it's very easy to cook. It's literally boiling and then simmering for 20 minutes and it's done. You don't have to keep an eye on it. You just leave it and then take it off the stove at the end. And it has a nice flavor. It helps things stick together, but it's just different. It's a different food to try. And the other grains that I really like are quinoa. I think is a fantastic one. That really is a good source of fiber and protein. Quinoa is a nice one. Pearl barley is fantastic, and pearl barley is what I find it's great for is throwing it into a soup or stew. And it just adds, it has a really nice bite and texture, and it just cooks easily. You just add it to the stew about 20 minutes before you finish, and it just cooks up. And there is a fair bit of evidence that the bacteria in the gut that take these grains and these fibers to keep us healthy, they like a diversity of food. So one of the probably two of the most important things for the good bacteria in our gut is one, to eat lots of fiber because that's what they feed on. And in turn, those bacteria do us a huge favor by feeding on that fiber and turning it into what's called short chain fatty acids, which we absorb into our blood. It reduces inflammation, but also those short chain fatty acids feed the cells that line our gut and keep that healthy. So fiber is really important for the bacteria in the gut, but diversity of foods apparently they're finding is very important. So aiming to have 30 different plant foods in a week. And that includes herbs and spices and just everything, nut seeds, all different types. So using different grains just helps to add to that, keeps food interesting, and it's delicious, I have to say. And millet is one of the oldest grains, and may well be the oldest grain that we have on record of 10,000 years ago. And being able to harvest the seeds and grow millet allowed cultures to move from hunter-gatherers, where they were collecting wild seeds and grains, to actually being able to plant them, which was the start of agriculture, where civilizations could then settle and develop into prosperous civilizations rather than having to be wandering cultures.
Well, you made a really excellent point. I haven't heard somebody say it the way you did, and where you said in a week try to aim for 30 different plant foods. And I haven't thought of it saying it that way, but I do recommend that people. We all have Mark's driving, not Mark, but the rest of us have our aprons on, and this is our power plate, right? So we recommend you eat fruits, grains, legumes, and vegetables. What I tell my students and friends is to have a good variety of foods, and that's a great way to say it, is to give a recommendation. When we put a number on something, it helps people. And so, for example, fiber. So what we tell folks who, in Food for Life is to aim for 40 grams of fiber. And it's pretty easy when you enumerate, for example, a serving of beans, I think is like 7 or 8 grams, something like that. And I like to have a big serving of beans. So maybe my serving is 15 grams. I'm getting close to halfway of requirement for a day, right? It's easy. I find it's easy to get 40 grams. And so what you've said is, that might be something that some of our viewers may enjoy doing, is if you have a mobile device, a phone or something, or you have a piece of paper. Michael Greger does the same thing. He has the daily checklist of what are the cool things to eat, and you can check off, did I have my berries today? Did I get my whole grains, and so forth. So that might be a good target for some people. Are we eating 30 different plant foods a week, which is really cool. And I think it's important that, Nancy, you pointed out whole grains. So whole grain is important, so you don't strip off the bran and the outside portion of it, where much of the nutrition is. Karen, I wanted to talk to you. The light's behind you, by the way, so you look silhouetted a bit, but that's better.
There you go.
So you had as always, a lot of great things to share. One thing I noticed is you had some spotted bananas on your table. I love spotted bananas. They're sweeter. My daughter, she's a kid in the kitchen. She doesn't eat as many bananas as I'd like her to, and she's very particular if there's spots. Sometimes she says, I really don't want them. So can you talk a little bit about how bananas are, how they mature, and is there a sweet spot from a nutrition or from I guess taste is everybody's own preference, but can you talk about the maturation of bananas?
Yeah, I mean, the ones I've gotten lately have been so green in the store. I mean, they're picked way before they're ripe to transport them. And then I lately have been leaving them on the counter for over a week before, and they go from green to yellow and firm to spotted and a little bit softer, and then they can be brown. But as they ripen, they get sweeter. It is personal preference, but some people who are worried about blood sugar might prefer ones that are not so ripe. I prefer the ripe ones, and I didn't have to add any extra sugar to my cookies.
And bananas, they give you potassium. I use them in schools where I teach at to encourage children to, give them a good boost of energy and not to spike. Carolyn also works with kids, and you know that as well. And one thing I really like, and it was evident in your recipe, is banana can also be a nice binder. It's great for keeping things together like you did cookies. Some people, I had this question in one of my classes about baking, about cooking. What do we use instead of eggs? And so banana is one choice. Banana doesn't necessarily give you the rise that, for example, a set of powders like Energy Egg Replacer or Bob's Red Mill Egg Replacer, flax, things like that, but it's still a good binder. I wanted you to talk a little bit more as well about the dessert, about cookies, and about rate limiting. So the cookies that you are making, why? I think you made a comment about not necessarily restricting how many you have. So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, that was full. It had squash is actually a fruit. You want to say like vegetable. It had a lot of vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants, no added sugars, no oils. None of the things that you restrict. If you were just going to eat a serving of oatmeal, I think that whole thing made over 2 dozen cookies, and it was like 3 servings of oatmeal. But you wouldn't restrict yourself if you were eating oatmeal or if you were eating squash or bananas. Actually, your body tells you when you've had enough. And you don't desire anymore. But they're so healthy, you can just eat them anytime.
It was interesting when you're talking about limiting and squash, because we were talking recently about honey nut squash. I think it was Mark actually who had talked about honey nut squash, and that's something that you and I enjoy, isn't that?
Yeah, yeah. I love squashes, and we have a local farm, and my wife actually went there at the end of the season and made a deal with the farmer that in my me lay out all those different squashes. I mean, that was about half, so I've already used half the amount. So, know that at the end of growing seasons, farmers would rather get rid of their produce than throw it out. So make them a deal.
That's a great suggestion. You can do that at farmers markets as well. Some farmers markets, like the one we go to, have very strict rules. They can't sell beyond a certain point, and they can't make deals like that. But I'm sure it varies tremendously.
Right.
Susanna, one thing I always love watching you cook as well. The colors you use, the way you prepare food is wonderful. I wish all of us could get together and eat at each other's kitchens.
Mhm.
But
Right.
Susanna, you were using Brussels sprouts, and I was in awe because I love Brussels sprouts and how huge yours were. And you commented too. That's what you found in the market. So one thing I wanted to ask about is one thing I have found recently is I cut when I use Brussels sprouts. I cut the very end and I take the outer leaves and I used to and I usually compost it, but what I sometimes do is I throw it into a stew or a soup, and I find that the Brussels sprout disintegrates and even the end adds a very nice flavor. So I wanted to ask you, do you do anything with the ends of your Brussels sprouts? And there is conventional wisdom, and I don't follow it, that not only do you cut the end, but you make a V shape and you remove the white pith part. And I generally don't. I wanted to see if you wanted to share anything about how you work with Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, no, typically, and those were huge, and I was so excited when I saw them in the store. Typically, I will pull off the outer leaves, and I will cut just the really hard part of the end, but I don't do the V and cut out. It almost looks like a stem. I go ahead and use all of that. I don't take that out. And I haven't used, the outer stems, what I do, and I don't know if they're eating them, but we have a couple of bunnies that live in our backyard. And so I will put them out in a little place where I know that they hang out. I come back and some of them are gone. So I think they're eating them, but I'm not sure. But I try not to. We do compost too. I like your idea of putting them in soups or stews to add that boost of flavor and also nutrients. So I'm going to have to try that.
It surprised me because, it seems kind of tough, but it adds. I mean, if you just kind of put it in your mouth raw, it doesn't have much flavor. But
Right.
when I pressure cook, when I put it in the pressure cooker, it just is really good. So I sometimes what I do when I'm cooking Brussels sprouts is I'll chop the ends off in the outer leaves and I'll put them in a bottle and I'll
Mhm.
keep them until next time I'm pressure cooking something, and it adds a really nice flavor. So.
Yeah, I'll definitely try that. That's a great idea.
I was wondering if somebody could talk a little bit about what is Food for Life. We're ultimately we know each other because we're all Food for Life instructors. Carolyn, would you like to talk a little bit about what is Food for Life? And then maybe somebody else could talk about the good news about our certification has reopened. Because a lot of people, we occasionally get comments from people who watch our shows that I want to be a Food for Life instructor. So, Carolyn, what is Food for Life? What is the Food for Life program? How long have you been a Food for Life
Sure.
instructor? How long have we been around?
Oh goodness. Well, I've been a Food for Life instructor. That's a lot of questions all at one time.
I
I've been
know.
a Food for Life instructor. I've been a Food for Life instructor since 2015, I think. So more than 6 years now. It was August of 2015. And Food for Life is the kind of community educational branch of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is an organization, a nonprofit that has been around for probably close to 45 years now, founded by Dr. Neil Bernard, who is also now the founder of the Bernard Medical Center in Washington, D.C. But Food for Life there are probably 300 of us Food for Life instructors around the world. And really literally around the world. We have people like you saw today in Abu Dhabi, and in the UK and in South America and
South
in
Africa,
Africa
Brazil.
and in Central America and in the Bahamas, or
Japan,
the Caribbean
China,
at least. Yeah, we're everywhere. So, and there are about 300
India.
of us. Isn't that so cool that we're all over the
Yeah.
place? So yeah, and we teach classes they are evidence-based classes. They are not just somebody's opinion, your hairdresser's neighbor's sister who, did whatever diet. It's actual scientific evidence-based information that we share. It's not just our opinions about things. And we go through training, to know what we're talking about. So you can trust that if there's a Food for Life instructor in Florida and I have somebody here who is moving to Florida and wants to find a Food for Life instructor, I can just look it up you can look it up at pcrm.org and under our Food for Life program and find an instructor just about everywhere. But I can trust that if I'm if I have somebody I know who's moving to Florida, I can say, you could call this person and they'll know what they're talking about and find out if they're teaching classes. So yeah, it's a neat program. It's quite a privilege and an honor to be a part of it. Very exciting.
I totally agree with you. I learned so much from fellow Food for Life instructors. We're selected rather competitively. We have to know a lot about veganism, about food. We have to know a lot about preparing food, and we have to be able to be effective teachers. And we're checked on that. We have to submit videos, and we're interviewed, and there's a background check, and then there's a there was an in-person in-person training. So there's a lot involved in becoming a Food for Life instructor, and I totally agree with Carolyn. If I know that, for example, Jen is in not Alabama,
Louisiana.
you're in Louisiana,
I'm in
right?
Alabama. She's in Louisiana. We look alike, but we're not.
So
we're Southerners,
if I know,
though.
that's right. And I just muted you, Jen, because there was some feedback, but I'll unmute you in a second. So I know, even if I didn't know how wonderful Jen is, if I knew somebody were in her area, then I could hardly recommend her. I don't cook from recipes. I doubt you guys do either. But in the Food for Life program, I do. And I tell my students, I'm following this recipe, although I make some deviations. Yesterday, I threw a bunch of citrus into one of the salads that didn't call for any citrus. I love citrus. But I know that I follow the recipe. So this way, if somebody says to somebody in Louisiana, see if you have an instructor, and there's Jen, that they will have the same foods. So that's the cool thing. And Food for Life helps us maintain our health. And if we end up in certain situations like diabetes or cancer or high blood pressure, we have specific ways of working with that through diet. Jen, I know that you had some technology problems. I'm going to unmute you, and I wanted you said something. I'll unmute you in a second that really very pleasantly surprised me, and that was that wild rice is a complete protein. My daughter has been asking me a while because we talk about quinoa is one of the few complete proteins. And she asked me about a year ago, Daddy, what are the other complete proteins? And I didn't know. Tofu is another complete protein. So complete protein are foods that have the 9 amino acids that we can't synthesize. And I didn't know wild rice is one of them. So that's really cool. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to spend some time talking about wild rice. I love wild rice. I like the texture of it. It's not a rice, as you said at all. It's a grass. I find it very expensive. So I was wondering if you could talk about that. If one is trying to eat on a budget, can we save money on wild rice? Are there places to buy it, ways to buy it? And if you could talk a little bit more about the nutrition, that'd be great.
How's my feedback? Is it okay?
Good.
Oh, good, good. So I save money on wild rice by mixing it with other rices. So it is pricey. I buy a small bag once a year, and it lasts forever because I mix it with the other rice. That's the best way to save money on it. And I mean, it's not much of a different flavor than other rices. It does have a little bit of different texture to it. So that's what I would recommend, is mix it with the brown rice. It adds color to your dish, and then you can get, you don't need a lot of it to get the extra nutrients out of it. So just mix it up. I have not purchased it online, so I don't know how much online is. I just get a bag a year, and it lasts.
Wild rice, as far as I remember, grows mainly in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Canada. So there's something about the temperature there where it's cooler, but it doesn't grow down where you are in the south.
No, it's like an Indian rice in the northern. That's where it's originally from. Now I don't know if they've cultivated it to be down here, but the waters I think are too cold or too warm in the south for it. But yeah, it's a northern North American grain or seed. Yeah, that the Indians cultivated, and we fortunately got to take advantage of what they discovered.
And Jen, I figured out that to avoid feedback, one of us should be unmuted. So when I ask you a question, I'll unmute myself, then I'll mute myself. I wanted you to also spend a little bit of time. But before I was married, I used to use a seasoning called celery seed. And when you were using celery in your cooking, that reminded me of that. My wife doesn't like celery, so I I actually bought celery last week for my daughter and me. We both love it, and I made cream of celery soup by simply blending celery and some cashews and various herbs and water. Can you talk about celery seed? Is this a seasoning that you use in your cooking? And let me unmute you. Just find you a second. Let's see. There you are. Unmuted. Oh, I'm sorry. You're still muted. Sorry about that. Okay. There you go.
There you go. Okay. So I might sneeze in a minute. I feel a tickle, just so you know. Yeah, I do love celery seed. I love it really like I grew up with it in potato salad. So New England style potato salad, we use celery seed. And it's a great, that's really the only place I use celery seed. Once in a while I use celery salt to add a little flavor, which is, not a lot of salt. You don't need a lot of salt when you're using celery because it does add that, like I said in my video, it does add a little salty flavor to your dish. But I love any kind of seed. So when I see something that says seed, I usually try to use it because, what's a seed? What's a seed loaded with? It's loaded with nutrients to help a plant grow. So, you want all those great prime nutrients right from the beginning of the life of another plant. So,
Yeah, that's a good point, that seeds generally are, and we sprout. So for example, broccoli has good anti-cancer properties, and part of the reason is because it's so young and has all these nutrients. Would somebody like to talk about, we started talking about when Jen rejoined us about the Food for Life program, and some of our audience members may want to become Food for Life instructors. And we talked about you need to be a vegan, you need to be, understand whole food plant-based eating. And now we've restarted the certifications. So there's a training coming up. Does anybody want to talk about that?
I'm happy to talk about
Sure.
it.
Go
So
ahead, Nancy.
Mark and Jen and I were in the last group that came through training before lockdown. So when was it? It was last February 2020. And it's, I think if I remember, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk about it. I don't know what I can remember. Lockdown seems to have wiped out my memory. But it was 3-4 days of training, and we went to California. I think it's often run from Washington, D.C., but our intake was California. And it's a fantastic few days of learning how to teach, watching people teach, finding out about media to help, present. It's finding out about nutrition, and it's basically everything we need to know about how to be a Food for Life presenter, which actually we're really put through that. Well, I was anyway, and I think everybody else was put to the test with lockdown, because we were learning to be Food for Life instructors and teaching classes at the same time. We were learning to do it on Zoom and other social media channels. And what's involved with the Food for Life is there's various programs based on different aspects. So there's a 5-6 weeks, Kickstart Your Health, which is, it's a 2-hour class, usually once a week, 2 hours for 5 to 6 weeks. You can get a blitz on a weekend and do it all on a weekend, but generally it's taught once a week. 2-hour class, and it involves a talk and discussion at the beginning, followed by the instructor, ourselves, going through cooking 3 recipes and showing people how it's done. And there's different courses. There's Kickstart Your Health, which gets people going on a plant-based diet. It can be geared towards people who are aiming to lose weight on a plant-based diet, but really the main goal for everybody is just to feel better. And I've often said that the paradox of people who want to lose weight is they want to lose weight. Most people want to lose weight so that they feel better. But the process of getting there, people often feel the worst they've ever felt, because they go on these horrible diets where they're hungry all the time, they're hangry, and they lack energy. Whereas the Food for Life program, which is based on a whole food, plant-based, people feel better. I felt better when I was doing it. Most people will say it's the best thing they've ever done. They wish they'd done it earlier. So it's a process of losing weight, but the real goal is to feel better as soon as you start doing it. So it's not a miserable diet. It's a fantastic way to start eating. So there's the Kickstart Your Health. There's some other programs. One is for people with diabetes to help manage and aim to reverse, if possible, their diabetes. The other is cardiovascular, so heart health. And these courses tend to run sort of 7-8 weeks. So that's basically what it's about. I forgot the question, but that's my answer.
Oh yeah, about the certification and how we can the new certification is in person. Didn't we have one certification that was online? I think we did.
I think the last one might have been, but I actually lost track, so I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
They
I actually think they're in the middle of it right now. I think they're doing it already right now.
Oh, it's underway.
I could be wrong, but I think it's already underway. Yeah.
Okay,
I think it started this month. I think I'll have to look that up.
So if you're interested, if you come to fflclasses.org, you can say, look for an instructor, look for a class, or become an instructor. One thing I wanted to circle back a little bit about and I should have done it in my segment, the nature of today's show. So some of you who are watching, may not be in the United States. Canada already had their Thanksgiving. Other countries have their Thanksgiving, don't have Thanksgiving, but our food is meant for holidays and festive occasions. There's a friend of mine, Rin Berry. He's no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago. But thanks, Barry, for the nice comment. Rin was the historical advisor to the North American Vegetarian Society, and Rin's research showed that at the first Thanksgiving, with the Pilgrims and the native folks, turkeys were not served. Dead turkeys were not served. It was almost entirely. It could have been entirely vegan. There might have been a tiny bit of wild game, is the way he describes it, maybe a dead deer or something. And so, if you want to, this is a great time to experiment with plant-based eating. If you serve, there's so many. A lot of people go to Thanksgiving, they have all these sides. Well, we eat. If you want to call them sides, that's fine. And I thought it would be kind of fun to just take a moment and go around and see what we're doing for Thanksgiving. And I should have laid claim to an important honor I have. For quite a few years now, I've been hosting the country's largest vegetarian Thanksgiving. It's all vegan, and it's with the pandemic, we're not getting almost 1,000 people, but in the past we did. We used to sell out in less than 2 minutes, and literally we have regulars who fly in from upstate New York, Florida. Family drives from Philadelphia. We have a couple people who started coming from Canada, 1 or 2 people from California. So it's a great event. So maybe next year our audience may enjoy triangleveg.society.org coming to our Thanksgiving. But vegan Thanksgivings aren't rare. I dare say, every state, I bet, has a number of vegan Thanksgivings. And so for us, Thanksgiving is going out to the vegan Thanksgiving that I organize. Jen, do you want to take a moment and talk about what does Thanksgiving mean to you? I'm going to unmute me and
Well, what it means to me is getting together with family. We're not really big on the food. Unfortunately, I am married, he's outside, to a picky eater who doesn't really enjoy eating a lot of food. So that's hard to believe with the way I am with food. But so we've never really made a big deal out of the food. It's more about being together and sitting together and just spending time together and watching football. That's what we like to do on Thanksgiving. So I'm not a good one. I'm not a good one to ask the food question.
No, and that's implicitly my answer too. I didn't mean that. I meant in terms of food. What are your choices? Thanksgiving? Do you do anything differently than normally?
Well, I have memories from my mother and back in the day where she would make a wonderful bread stuffing. We didn't do the rice stuffings or cornbread. It was a white stuffing. So I like that. And yeah, I love the side dishes. I love the green bean casserole, and I love broccoli and the wild rice, and I love the seasonal vegetables. So the squashes. That's what I love. But if I make a lot of it, I'll be eating for months because my husband doesn't eat it. So.
Susanna, how about you?
We'll have, we're planning a big feast this year because now with the pandemic kind of ebbing and family members vaccinated, we'll have my son and his wife and one of my brothers come from Chicago. So we're going to have, Jen, a very similar rice dish that we're going to put in acorn squash. Carolyn, my husband, loved your turkey roast that you made last year when we had this class. And so he'll be making that. He'll be making a seitan ham, and we'll have pies, 4 pies. We're going to have a huge feast just because last year it was just the 4 of us in our household due to the pandemic. So we're looking forward to getting back together, and we're just going to have a ton of food. We plan on hiking and eating the whole weekend.
That sounds really nice. Karen, what in Austin, Texas, you guys have a very active vegetarian society, and you have a place called Casa de Luz, I think. Is that something that you'll be doing at Thanksgiving? Being there?
I have done that. It's a macrobiotic. It's not really a restaurant. They have a restaurant, but it's a whole community, and it's beautiful, and the food is always great. And they do have they usually have a big meal for Thanksgiving and also for Christmas. This Thanksgiving, I haven't even really thought about. I'm sure I'll do something. I just love that everything stops and you have time to spend with family or friends. That's the important thing. But the Sunday after Thanksgiving, Dr. Will Tuttle is going to be here in Austin, and we're going to have a little event, and I'm doing the food for that. So that's what I've been concentrating on up to now.
Carolyn, how do you guys celebrate Thanksgiving? Do you bring people aboard who aren't vegan?
Sometimes, yes. Actually, I'm not sure if it's for Christmas this year or Thanksgiving. We'll be having a relative come down and spend some time with us since everybody's vaccinated now and we can be together. We'll probably be at my mother's house, but I will make that turkey roast that I made, that tofu turkey breast that I made last year on our show, which you could go back and watch last year's Thanksgiving show, or you could look at it. I made it recently for my YouTube channel, Strickland's and Friends, a seasonal whole food plant-based cookbook. So it should be on there. But we'll make that for sure. And then I make a roasted garlic gravy that I shouldn't make it just once a year. It's so good. I should make it all the time, but it is delicious. It involves an entire whole head of roasted garlic. It's so good. Probably a green bean casserole. Possibly the one that I think was it Melissa who made that today. That looked really good too. Those green beans.
She made green beans. Yeah.
But yeah. So I have a green bean casserole that's actually super healthy green bean casserole. It doesn't involve cream of mushroom soup. It does have mushrooms in it, but there's not that cream of anything. Probably some stuffing. Or I guess in the South we call it dressing. So I think it's only stuffing if you stuff it into a turkey, which we will not be doing. So it's dressing down here. So we're having some dressing and probably a big kale salad. And I might make that one that Cody made today because that looked really good. I do love kale salad. And pumpkin pie, of course, because yes, I've been making a pumpkin pie lately. I had to practice it. Brian always says I need more practice. So that's only because he wants me to keep practicing making things. So, but yeah, I make a pumpkin pie that has, I think it uses the crust from a PCRM. It might have been the cancer cookbook, Dr. Bernard's cancer book. And there's a whole recipe section, and I think it's from there. It's that G Mama's nutty graham cracker crust, and then a really good filling from the Gentle Chef that I just kind of combined recipes. It's quite good. Yeah, and homemade cranberry sauce, of course, homemade cranberry sauce. I'm all about the homemade cranberries, and we get organic cranberries here from we're a member of 2 different CSAs, which is crazy, but because we eat mostly, all just fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. So we're members of 2 different local CSAs, and one of them is getting some organic cranberries in for us this next week. So I'm really
And
excited about that.
some of us may not know CSA means for community supported
Oh yeah,
agriculture, where you take the risk out of growing from the farmer, and we say to the farmer, here's $500, $300, whatever it is. We get a quarter
right,
share, a half share, a full share. If you have a bumper crop of squash, we get a bumper crop of squash. If your okra doesn't
right,
come out so well, we don't get so much okra, and it helps farmers to
right.
farm and not have as much financial risk. It's a great idea.
Exactly. Yes. And you basically buy a share of that farm and
Or a half
it's
share, right?
wonderful.
It is,
Or
yeah.
yeah, but I mean, depending on how many people join and how many people they can support with one farm. And we've joined 2 different local ones, which are really popular down here. I've been impressed that we've kind of picked up on the number of organic, and they're all organic farmers down here too. So that's been really good
We
to support them.
we get really good frozen biodynamic, not frozen, we get really good biodynamic organic cranberries. And Suzanne is the one who inspired me. She did, I think it may have been the Thanksgiving show last year. She did some really good things with cranberries. And I hadn't regularly bought cranberries, but after Susanna's presentation, I nabbed a few bags, and they freeze really well. So I used some, and I froze the rest. And they keep really well. So that's exciting as well. So quality of ingredient really does make a difference, doesn't it, when you cook?
Mm.
I know when I was married, I used to always use canned beans, and my wife said, "Why don't you make your own beans? They taste better." And that's what I do now. I always have canned beans because sometimes last minute you need something, but it's nice to be able to make your own, save money as well. Nancy, you're not. I know you have roots in Canada, and the Canadians have their own Thanksgiving. So I wanted to ask you, what does Thanksgiving mean to you? And in your case, you could interpret that as another holiday that you know.
Oh, you're absolutely right. As a Canadian living in the UK for the last 35 years, I missed out on both counts for American Thanksgiving. So Canadian Thanksgiving is in October, so it's already happened. And the Brits don't celebrate Thanksgiving. It just the idea behind it doesn't exist here. So I think, and even though I am Canadian, we haven't celebrated Thanksgiving here. It just seems to come and go without the build up around me. It comes and goes without me even thinking about it. But I think the closest is probably Christmas. I consider it a very similar meal, and we have a lovely Christmas dinner. We usually have a nut roast. And this year, I think I'm going to do the millet loaf because 2 of my kids have nut allergies. So instead of the nut loaf, I'll do millet loaf for them. And then we do mashed potatoes, lots of veg, Brussels sprouts, and a delicious vegan gravy, I have to say. So that's the nice thing about it. I just love the meal. We don't actually tend to do pudding. I've made the mistake in a couple of years past of making a pudding for a pudding in England is dessert, making a dessert for for Christmas meal, and everybody's too full, so we never ever get around to it. So I don't bother with that anymore. But yeah, a nice simple Christmas meal, and that for me is always quite similar to the Thanksgiving meals when I was growing up. That style. I wasn't vegan when I was growing up, but I mean that style of meal.
Well, I find it interesting that when we celebrate Thanksgiving, giving thanks, why should we be killing animals to give thanks? It seems really kind of strange. Or
Mhm.
pardoning the turkey. It's a tradition in the United States that the president of the United States pardons the turkey. I'm not sure what the turkey did that was so bad. We have the Vegetarian Society that I am involved with. Before I was involved with, now we have this huge Thanksgiving. We were on national TV years before I was here, eating with turkeys. So there was a potluck, and the turkeys had their own food, and humans had their own food. So that made national TV. Barry made a comment. Barry, Carrie, please share our next class. And I wanted to mention it's a long URL, but you can find all the Food for Life classes, and I'll try to put that up. If you go to fflclasses.org, and you can look and see if there's any Food for Life classes in your neighborhood, in your city. A lot of the classes, because of the pandemic, have gone online. I'm trying to find the link here, have gone online. And so you might say, I know, for example, Mark, I think his classes are online. And if you really like Mark, you might say, wow, I'd love to take a class with him. How come I don't see the banner? And so you can see, is Mark offering? Oh, here we go. So you can see, is Mark offering a class? Or maybe, Carolyn, is that the Barry that you teach classes with? Because then
No,
you could,
that's
no,
Barry
okay.
Levin. That's Barry
Okay.
Levin.
Okay. All right. And so you can, if you're interested in classes that, that Carolyn teaches, you're in Alabama, then just go to fflclasses.org and say, find a class, and look under Alabama. So I think that that is about it for us today. Does anybody have anything else you want to share before we talk about the
I
upcoming
have a
shows?
question.
Sure, Carolyn.
I actually have a question for Karen. Where do you find orange essential oil, and do you think it makes the cookies more flavorful than the orange zest? Because the recipe says orange zest or orange oil, and I just wondered what do you think is the difference?
Well, so the original recipe was orange zest, and I would prefer that. Because I have not been able to find an organic orange here. So
Are you serious?
I'm serious. That's why I decided to use the orange oil. This was I mean, I've been, experimenting with it because I can't find an orange. But and it tastes pretty much the same. And the orange oil I got at one of our local store, natural grocer. But they also, like, you could use, if you do Young Living or doTERRA, any of the higher quality oils, and it just takes a little, so that the flavor is similar, but I prefer the zest. But if I'm going to use zest, I prefer to use an organic orange.
Yeah, when you zest, you really should use organic. So I'm surprised you don't get organic in Austin. We
Well, we
definitely do.
usually do. I don't know what the deal is this year.
Wow, that's strange. We're going through a shoulder season where we're getting organic grapefruit right now, but not other oranges or tangerines. I just can't wait till the oranges and tangerines come down the road. Carolyn, I have orange oil. It's easy to find. Frontier sells it. You can get it at
Okay.
grocery stores. I have essential lemon oil and orange oil as well, and it's all organic.
Okay, I just haven't looked for it yet. I mostly just zest, but I've seen organic oranges at my Whole Foods anyway, so I haven't seen them anywhere else, but at least our Whole Foods has some organic ones.
And anybody
So
who's been watching our shows for a while know that I'm a fiend for citrus, and my favorite
triple cross.
citrus triple cross tangerine, and that's organic.
We all know.
That's its season for us is March. Well, it comes from California, so the season is March or late February and March, and it's organic and to die for.
Yes, looking forward to that.
So our upcoming shows, does anybody else have anything to share about Thanksgiving or anything we talked about today? It was a great show full of lots of information. So our upcoming shows, I think our December show is the first Saturday in December, and it's on holiday appetizers. We're going to run an outro in a minute, and you'll see the details. But I think our December show is holiday appetizers. And then the kids in the kitchen. So several of us, Cody, who's live right now cooking Thanksgiving, her Thanksgiving show for another hour or so. So Cody and she has 3 wonderful children, and then we have another instructor, Ella, who has 2 wonderful kids in Rhode Island, and then my lovely daughter, Anu. They all cook together every other month. Anu is going to be in India in December, and so we're trying to figure out how to do that. We're going to see if she can join remotely and share from there. But that's the kids in the kitchen are December 11th, and then we're back. We already have our January plans. Does anybody remember? I think it's snacks. Snacks is our January show.
That's right, snacks.
So, and we're talking about maybe the Valentine's weekend for February, but we haven't picked our theme yet. So maybe it's romantic foods, maybe it's something else. Years ago, there was a local, it was a YMCA, and I actually put a menu together of aphrodisiac foods for Valentine's Day, which was kind of interesting. So let's see. Yeah, somebody is sharing. Nancy Norris Sprouts says organic oranges. So yeah, you just kind of have to look. So with that, it was a nice show, and unless anybody else has anything final to say, we'll sign off. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating.
Yeah, sounds great.
And I hope that
everybody's stuff.
That's right. I hope that the recipes, let me put the recipes up. Here are the recipes. And the recipes we put together, it's more than 40 pages, everything you saw here. My good friend Brenda Davis, she's one of my favorite nutritionists. She has a nutrition section. She has her own recipes that she's contributed. She's written quite a few books, so she always has an appendix, and we're indebted to her for that. So please help yourself to the recipes. Share feedback if you want to reach any of us. It's our first name Jen, for example, is Jennifer@SoManyCooks.com. Nancy special, because we have two Nancys. I think if you send it to Nancy@SoManyCooks.com, it goes to both Nancys. I think it's Nancy M to Nancy Manifold, Nancy M@SoManyCooks.com. So you can reach us by email, and we welcome any comments. And on our Facebook or YouTube pages, if you have suggestions about shows, and thank you, Laura, for having watched. If you have any suggestions, just post it. We are in the planning stages for February, and if you have an idea, please, please, please do this. We'll definitely consider it. We have a long list of ideas, and I don't think the list is going to shorten. There's so many things we could do: cooking under pressure, cooking with certain devices, air frying, cooking with. We've never done a tempeh show, I don't think. So, a tempeh, maybe a mushroom show. Maybe something just on Brussels sprouts, maybe something on cruciferous vegetables. So thank you, Nancy, as well for your comments. So with that, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you just in a few weeks in early December for our Holiday Appetizers show. So take care, everybody. Thanks for having joined.
Bye.
And remember to watch Cody and Tammy and Tim's show. There's a gentleman named Tim. They're on right now for another hour with their Thanksgiving show. Take care, everybody.
So many cooks in the kitchen, so many recipes to share. So many cooks in the kitchen with meals for you to prepare. We've got fruits and grains, veggies and beans, more healthy food than you've ever seen. So many cooks in the kitchen, plant-based meals to prepare. So many cooks in the kitchen with ideas we're happy to share.